All right, hello everybody. Rob Williams and I here. We are starting our digital streaming coverage tonight, bringing you everything you need to know about the election. Of course, the big presidential race, the state races, the local races. We have a lot to cover tonight.
And Jessica and I are going to be here from right now until 9:45. We're going to be following the numbers as they come in.
Right.
This year, Gray, our parent company, has given us tools so we can follow the election like they do on a national level, but also have a local bent to it.
Yeah, and it's really an incredible tool. I mean, this is our presidential map, and this is literally giving us the amount of electoral college votes as they come in. And this just changed, Rob, from before we went on. These have now gone completely red, so it looks like these two states in our tri-state, Indiana and Kentucky, are now being called for President Trump, former President Trump.
So the thing is what's really important is to know when the polls close.
Right.
Because you can't release the information about how the vote totals are going until the polls are closed. In Indiana and Kentucky, the polls closed at 6 o'clock, so we're starting to get information in. Let's check Indiana first, right? Well,
wow.
And it did show up as red, but just keep in mind, only 12.5% of the votes have been counted so far, so you can't rely on it, but we do know that Indiana is a red state, right? It's a reliably red state. So what we can do is, out of this entire state, with only about 12% of the votes in, we see one leaning blue here, right? So we can click on this. We learned that it's Hamilton County. This is the suburbs north of Indianapolis. Indianapolis is not in yet. That will probably go blue because it's more urban, but none of the precincts are reporting yet. So we can see where the state is leaning. As you see here, there's a difference between being red and leaning red. If it's red, it's red. If it's leaning red, it's a lighter pink color. Same for the blues.
And it's kind of wild, Rob. I mean, based on only 13.6% that they're calling it. I mean, this is coming from our Gray company, parent company, decision desk. They are the ones calling this, and they're already saying, just based on what they're seeing, their analysis, the data, the votes that are in, that they believe Indiana is going to go for former President Donald Trump.
And Jessica and I have been talking about this. We're following the AP, but we won't make a call until the Gray decision desk makes a call about a state flipping, leaning, or being called for a certain presidential candidate. So we will watch all those for you. One other thing I'm going to point out is that Ohio, you see no votes returning here?
Right.
It's because the polls don't close until 7:30. But once that closes, we're going to start following that. We hear that election turnout has been around 70 to 75%.
Wow.
The other big state is Florida. And as you can see, Florida is leaning red so far. Let's see how many people have.
19.5.
19.5. It has 30 electoral votes. Florida is a very important state because it's growing so much in population. It has 30 electoral votes to give.
And I did just notice this. It does look like we do have a call here in Vermont as well. This, again, coming from our Gray decision desk. It looks like they're already calling it, which is kind of crazy because it's showing that there's no votes in.
Yeah.
But sometimes they do that. I mean, I know AP does that as well. They just base it on previous data, voting trends. And so we'll see what happens once more of those votes come in.
And exit polls, too. So you see that one's been called blue. This one here is white, and
a toss-up.
That means it's a toss-up.
Interesting.
All right? So just keep that in mind. We're also going to follow some of the important issues on the ballot as well.
Right, and there's a lot of them. So obviously the presidential race is a huge deal for everyone across the country. Another one we really want to highlight, though, is this race. Rob, we know this is a big one. A lot of money has been invested in this race. Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno.
Sherrod Brown was first elected to the Senate in 2007. At that time, Ohio was more of a swingy state than it is now. A lot of people would say Ohio went from a swing state to a reliably red state. So what happens now is Sherrod Brown is trying to go for his fourth term as senator, but he's having a fight with Bernie Moreno because of the way Ohio has changed in terms of the way it leans politically. We should also mention that $500 million has been spent on this race, making it one of the most expensive races of this cycle and probably of all time.
Highly contested and very important as well. So a lot of other races too that we're watching, Rob. I mean, of course, this one as well. Greg Landsman, Orlando Sanza running for U.S. House. No votes in yet for this one.
I think this is probably the race we're going to find out first.
Yes.
Because District 1 that they're running for is kind of Cincinnati and all the northern suburbs, right? So we should find out quickly how this goes. I talked with Dr. Niven last night, and he says he didn't expect anything unexpected here. He says Greg Landsman will probably win. We'll continue to follow the numbers as they come in. Once again, the polls haven't closed yet.
Yeah, that's still pretty early on. And this is another one I want to highlight as well, local race, Hamilton County prosecutor. Of course, Melissa Powers took over this role after Joe Dieter's moved to become an Ohio State Supreme Court justice there. Connie Pillich running against her. Again, polls are not closed, so we don't have any information, but we're watching that one. And then Rob, too, Hamilton County Sheriff. This one, these two know each other personally. They have a history.
So if you don't know this, Jim Neal used to be the sheriff.
Right.
And then Charmaine McCuffey became sheriff, and now he's running as a Republican, trying to get his old job back. So we will watch this too. Yeah,
and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that she was running the jail and that he may have fired her. So there was some bad blood, for lack of a better term, between these two. So this will be a hot race as well. Ohio issue 1, another one that's important. I know that we have covered this one as well, so we'll dig into that a little bit later. But this is, of course, related to the redistricting and gerrymandering in the state of Ohio. And then Kentucky Amendment 2, Rob, this one has been pretty controversial because a lot of people have been very supportive of it or very against it. They're very passionate about this issue related to the schools.
Correct. So we're going to follow that for you as well. The one thing I want to mention is that...
And there's a little bit more information.
Yeah. The one thing I want to mention is that we don't know how long it's going to be before we're able to call the presidential election.
We don't.
Pennsylvania still counts the votes the same way they did in, can we go back to the map?
Yeah.
The same way that they did in 2020, right? So if you have the 3 blue wall states, they are Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Now, Michigan has changed the way votes are counted. They started counting the votes about a week ago, right? Mm-hmm. In Pennsylvania, it took until Saturday after Tuesday's election to call it for President Trump. So we had to wait days to find out the result of the presidential race. They still count the votes the same way. And we just learned in Cambria County, there was a problem with the ballots in terms of how they were scanning.
Oh, gosh.
So now they are allowing voters in Cambria County to vote until 10 o'clock at night, which will further delay the results from Pennsylvania. We're expecting the same thing out of Wisconsin.
Could be days.
It could be days, yeah, absolutely.
So I want to take us back just for a minute to Kentucky issue 2. We were just talking about that, Rob, because we are seeing some of those numbers come in. Our reporter, Mike Schell, did do a story on this, really breaking down exactly what it is. We're going to go ahead and play that for you right now, just to give you some insight on exactly what we're talking about. So again, this is our reporter, Mike Schell.
Drive down almost any street in northern Kentucky and you will see the signs of divided neighborhoods on Kentucky Amendment 2. NKU political science professor Shauna Riley says there is a misconception what a yes vote would mean.
That it's school vouchers directly. It is not. Tomorrow or the day after the election, it does not necessarily mean that your student will get money to go to a private school. What it does is it provides the legislature the opportunity to pass that law.
According to Secretary of State Michael Adams, a yes on Amendment 2 would give parents choices in educational opportunities for the children in public schools.
You've got schools that won't have a good private school as an option, and funds are just going to be taken from them. So I just feel like for the good of the kids in the public school, this is probably not a good idea.
Yes on 2 is billed as putting students first. No on 2 is no to using public funds for public schools. Maria Ensweiler says her and her family are Catholic school educated.
We know the gift that it is, and we think that expanding it and saying yes on Amendment 2 would give other children in the state an opportunity to receive the gift of Catholic education where they otherwise may not be able to due to the financial burden that it may cause.
Most agree that public schools are struggling financially due to reduced funding and other measures, but should local taxpayers have to pick up the slack for public school budgets?
Taxes are going to go up. That's the other thing too. If schools are not properly funded, the public schools, that's going to be the way that they actually, try to make up that difference. It's going to come back to the taxpayers.
I know people that are on the no side. I've heard arguments of, well, it's public funds, should be used for public schools only. And I hear that. I don't think this would take away from that. It would just expand it, hopefully.
Okay, that was our Mike Schell there kind of explaining this Kentucky Amendment 2 we've been talking about, Rob.
Let's tell you about what we're seeing on our board.
Right.
Like probably 60 seconds ago, that read 7.1.
Right.
And now it reads 7.9. The reason why I point this out is that we're getting updates in real time.
Yeah, quite literally. Yeah. I mean, it's changing almost every time we turn around. Now, so far, again, this is barely 8% at this point, but it does look like no is the direction they're heading on Amendment 2 in Kentucky.
And once again, it would give state lawmakers the ability to pass an amendment that will allow them to use vouchers
Right.
for private schools. People and people who support it say it gives parents more options when it comes to their child's education. People who are against it say 80% of all kids in Kentucky, K through 12, go to public school, so you're going to be stealing from the majority of the students in the state.
Yeah,
That's
a lot
what
of passionate
opponents,
people.
yeah, absolutely. So we're going to keep watching this race as well.
This is another one. This is significant update
Yeah.
on the Indiana governor race. I mean, 14.2% of the votes are in, and our decision desk has already called this race for Republican Mike Braun.
Mike Braun is a current congressman. Now he is governor-elect of Indiana. I interviewed Jennifer McCormick when she had an event in our area of Indiana, and that was about 6 weeks ago, and she told me the polls show that it was tied.
Wow.
But we can see that a lot has changed in 6 weeks.
And I wouldn't call it a landslide, but
No.
I mean, it is 58% to 38% right now, but my guess is our decision desk is seeing this is going to continue to trend up for him.
So go back to the election map, because I want to point something out, right? As we look at Indiana, where the governor has been called, let's check this out. The one major county, Marion County, home of Indianapolis, probably the most urban area in the state, has not been called yet. So those numbers for Jennifer will probably change
Right.
once that comes in. But our desk says that enough has come in where they can
Yes.
call the state for the Republican governor.
And we are seeing a lot of red, so it makes sense that they made that decision as well. I know that we've covered a lot of the issues. I don't know, is it worth, Rob, going ahead and maybe doing one of our stories that we put together on the Indiana governor race for people who are not familiar with the candidates now that we know that Mike Braun has won?
Let's play that for them.
So we can take you there right now. So this is actually a package from our sister station in Evansville, WFIE. A reporter there, Caroline Clapp, put this together, and she just spoke with some of the candidates about it.
We should mention that she was getting a lot of support from governors across the country. And in fact, Kentucky Governor Beshear actually crossed the state line to campaign for her in Indiana.
Wow. Okay, so again, this is WFIE's Caroline Clapp, just to give you some insight now that we know that Mike Braun has won this race.
For voters on the fence about who they want to become Indiana's next governor, I asked all three candidates this same question. What would your message be to undecided voters going to the polls?
I would just ask him to consider someone who's doing this in a bipartisan fashion with Republicans, Democrats, and independents who want to see this as a Hoosier effort, not a party effort. I'm very fiscally conservative, so I understand money doesn't grow on trees and we need to be responsible. But we're not going to be able to do that unless we have someone who really brings back that balance. And there are a lot of Hoosiers that want to see change. And the only way to do it is to bring back common sense and balance. And that's what I intend to do.
Jennifer McCormick is representing the Democratic Party. Senator Mike Braun is the Republican candidate.
I'm going to be entrepreneurial at the job. I think it's a blessing to have spent 37 years in the real world. I was on our local school board 10 years. I was a state legislator 3 years, 6 years in the Senate. That ought to be a pretty good tutorial for being the CEO of our state. I like to roll up my sleeves, solve problems, and a governor's task, it ought to be well suited for that.
Representing the Libertarian Party is Donald Rainwater.
I'm just a Hoosier who's tired of feeling like our government is taking more and more money, more and more of our property, and we're not getting anything for it. I think we need a governor who understands what people are struggling with today. And I intend to go in there and do it, which is to safeguard the individual rights of the citizens of the state of Indiana.
So if you're just joining us, the governor race has been called by our decision desk, our Gray Television decision desk, and it's going to Republican Mike Braun defeating Jennifer McCormick.
Yeah, and so that was a package again from WFIE's Caroline Clapp. That's our sister station out in Evansville. Just to give you some insight if you didn't know a lot about now Governor-elect Mike Braun.
And we told you we're getting information in real time Jessica turned around. She goes, "I think I just saw a blue."
Yeah.
And it was this. And this is the state that a lot of people are watching because it's the first battleground state, right? 16 electoral votes, only 3.1% of the votes are in, and you'll see a cluster of blue around here.
Right.
And that's like Atlanta Metro and all of its suburbs, right?
Right.
So Kamala Harris has the best chance of gaining voters here, but our decision desk says Georgia is leaning blue. And 80% of new state law says all the early votes, mail-in votes, must be reported by the first hour. That's why we're getting all the results in there. As 80% of the votes, right? So we should learn what happens in Georgia fairly quickly. Trump won it in 2016. Biden was able to flip it in 2020.
Yeah.
But remember, it was only by 11,000 votes and change.
And that just happened.
That just popped up.
We're learning just as you all are. I mean, literally, these are just popping up as the votes are coming in real time. So
let's just see some of the counties, Fulton County, right? So we'll be watching that very closely to see what happens in Atlanta and Georgia in particular.
Yeah. I mean, there's more and more developments coming in there. I do know locally, here in Hamilton County, we have had a really strong voter turnout for this election, Rob, something that we have been keeping a really close eye on so far. And our Brittany Harry has been live there today. We want to try to go to her now if she's available, just to talk a little bit more about some of the turnout there. Brittany, we're going to send it over to you if you can kind of fill us in on what that turnout has looked like and what you're seeing there now at the Hamilton County Board of Elections.
Well, sure, Jess. Yeah, so 7:17 right now, so those polls are about to close at 7:30, of course, and that's when things will really start to ramp up here. Of course, though, as you can see behind me, there are poll workers that have been busy all day working, but like I said, that's expected to pick up soon whenever they really start counting all of the ballots. But as you mentioned, just a lot of voters, a lot of early voters in this election. 96,000 people voted in person early, and that actually broke 2020's record of 80,000 people. What's a little bit different this year is that the by-mail numbers are actually a little bit lower this year. But the Board of Elections is projecting overall that turnout will be somewhere between 70 to 74%. They're leaning on the lower end of that right now. And as I refresh the website here to see what the turnout is, it is 67.10% as of right now, 7:18, with just a few more minutes of the polls being open. So we talked to the Board of Elections a little bit earlier, just a little bit about the process that will happen once 7:30 hits.
Okay, our Brittany Harry live there at the Hamilton County Board of Elections.
Hey, Brittany, if you can still hear me, I want to ask you a question. You talked with Sherry Poland a little bit earlier today, and she says they're not leaving until that number reads 100% of the precincts reporting, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. They'll be here just as long as they need to be here. And of course, it's unclear exactly how long it will take. She said that, it could take a while. But as soon as they are able to get started with kind of counting the mail-in ballots and the early votes that they already have here in-house, they'll do that. And then what will happen after that is that they'll start getting everything from all the polling locations in Hamilton County where they'll be brought here by someone who is authorized to do that. And then they'll start counting them here in this room behind me as well.
Right. Brittany, thank you very much. We want to mention that these are the states whose polls closed at 7 o'clock. Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, Virginia. We've been looking at Indiana and Kentucky. We have those numbers. We're also looking at Georgia, where something interesting just happened.
It did. We turned around and Georgia is now leaning red. So, I mean, it's possible that this could keep flipping back and forth, Rob. I mean, this is going to change potentially as more and more votes come in. It's still really early.
It's still very, very early. Once again, former President Trump won the state in 2016. Biden was able to flip it in 2020, but only 11,000 votes and change. So that's a state that we're going to be watching closely. At 7:30, North Carolina, another swing state, Ohio, and West Virginia will have all their polls closed. So in about 10 minutes, so we should have more information about the numbers coming back for those important races.
And I'm going to hop over for a second here, Rob, to see
Yeah.
if we've got any update on Kentucky Amendment 2, because we should be getting more and more numbers on this one. So 10%, not a significant amount, but I mean, it is still leaning no on Kentucky Amendment 2.
Yeah, and the number is ratcheting up quickly because in 2 minutes it went from like 8 to 10.6. So we are getting updates all the time.
And we can show you this, but keep in mind, I mean, this is still really early. So many polls have not closed. This is very, very, very early numbers. This is just based on the votes that have come in thus far on the presidential race. But again, it just jumped just there right now.
Yeah.
It's going to continue to do that throughout the night.
And I don't have to tell you this, candidates on the presidential level spent very little time in Ohio because Ohio is reliably red.
Right.
Right? It's like California doesn't see a lot of presidential campaign visits because it's reliably blue.
Right.
When it comes down to how this presidential election is decided, it's decided by the swing states. So
Yes.
Georgia, North Carolina, the blue wall, which is Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. And just so you know, Donald Trump won all 3 states in 2016, and then Biden was able to flip all 3 states in 2020.
Be very interesting to see what
Arizona,
happens.
Nevada, also a swing state.
Yeah.
The West Coast is reliably blue, right? So, and the other race too. You know, I told you about how Sherrod Brown is having a hard time. He has a very close election because Ohio is relatively red. It's changed from when he first ran in 2007. Montana is also reliably red, and there is a Senate race going on there because the current senator there, John Tester, is a Democrat. So these 2 states, these senators,
Significant
are kind of
races.
in the fight for their lives
Yeah.
to hold on to their seats.
And we won't have any of those numbers for at least a little bit longer, about 8 minutes until
Yeah.
the polls close right here in Ohio. I do think, Rob, that we could maybe go now to a package that was put together, a story that was put together by our Gray DC Bureau reporter Stetson Miller on the economy, because I know that has been on the forefront of so many Americans' minds.
Yeah.
They want to know what these presidential candidates are going to do about the economy. So again, this is Stetson Miller. He is a reporter with our Washington, D.C. Gray Television Bureau, and this is a story he put together really explaining what both candidates have said about how they will handle the economy.
Concerns about the economy have been front and center on the 2024 campaign trail, and that's because it's such a crucial issue for many Americans right now. It's the top issue for voters in the 2024 presidential election, the economy. The Pew Research Center recently found that the issue will be key for over 80% of voters when it comes to deciding who the next president should be. And the candidates have certainly been talking about it a lot.
The day I take the oath of office, we will rapidly drive prices down and make America affordable again.
The Trump campaign says former President Trump's economic plans include tackling inflation, making the Trump tax cuts permanent, unleashing American energy, cutting back on wasteful government spending and regulations, imposing tariffs on foreign-made goods, and stopping illegal immigration, which the campaign says is driving up costs. Vice President Kamala Harris's policy proposals differ significantly. Her campaign says she plans to cut taxes for working people, lower food, grocery, and healthcare costs, tackle fees and fraud, place bans on price gouging, and invest in innovation and entrepreneurship to make it easier for small businesses to grow.
I believe we have an extraordinary opportunity to make our middle class the engine of America's prosperity, to build a stronger economy.
One recent survey shows more voters have confidence in Trump than Harris on economic issues, but some mainstream economists have been expressing concerns about Trump's policy proposals. University of Chicago economist Stephen Durloff says there are worries about proposals from both candidates.
I think if you were to ask most economists who is proposing more dangerous things for the United States, I'll be blunt, I think that Trump would be clearly the person who is identified. And the reasons for that are, number one, the tariffs. Second, his comments about wanting to reduce the independence of the Federal Reserve. An example of a policy on Harris's side, which most economists would react negatively to, are the proposals to have regulations on price gouging.
In Washington, I'm Stetson Miller.
So you heard that there. That was Stetson Miller from our DC Bureau with Gray Television.
We want to update you on some of the things happening. As we mentioned before, this one It was leaning blue, and then it went red, leaning red, and now we're getting Virginia, which is also leaning blue, according to the Gray Decision Desk.
And we are about to cut in live to Tricia Mackey in studio. Stay with us.
From Fox 19 Now, this is Election 2024.
Well, the polls are now closed in Kentucky and Indiana. Election results, they're starting to come in. AP News has already called both states for Donald Trump. Here in Ohio, the polls are closing in just moments at 7:30. Brittany Harry has been at the Hamilton County Board of Elections all afternoon, which is where your votes are counted as well. She's going to join us live from Norwood. So, Brittany, is it busy there? Are they just starting to count the ballots?
Well, yeah, so right now we are at the Board of Elections just waiting for the polls to close. We're only a couple minutes away at this point. So taking a look behind me here, okay, some of the workers just got back in here right now, and their work is really about to ramp up for them as soon as the polls close. So this is just, a day that they've been waiting for, a day that they've trained for. There are over 80,000, or there was over 80,000 voters back in 2020, and the record number of voters this year in the election, 96,000 voters who voted early in person. So, this is one of those years that is definitely record-setting for the number of people that have voted early. 2,800 poll workers that have been managing everything. And of course, we're going to stay out here all night, be monitoring this situation. They're going to start with those mail-in ballots, the early votes, those that they can count right away at 7:30 as soon as the polls close, because that is what they have here in-house. And then, of course, they will get all of the votes that came in from all of the locations around Hamilton County. So we'll continue to stay out here and update you. For now, reporting live in Norwood, Brittany Harry, Fox 19 Now.
All right, Brittany, thank you. Let's check in with Rob Williams and Jessica Schmidt. They are in the streaming center where they're going to stay put all evening long, following a bunch of local races for us from there. So, guys, can we first off look at the presidential race?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, Tricia, our decision desk has called Indiana and Kentucky for former President Donald Trump. Vermont is blue for Kamala Harris, and New Hampshire is leaning blue. But then these three states down south, Florida, South Carolina, and Georgia, all leaning red.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Tricia, because we actually saw Georgia initially leaning blue, then it switched to red. So we're expecting as the votes come in, obviously we'll have to continue to monitor this to see if it does go back and forth.
And speaking of that, probably 5 minutes ago, our decision desk was calling Virginia leaning blue.
Right.
And now it's white, meaning it's a toss-up.
And we'll show you this as well. This is still really early, obviously, in the voting. But based on the little bit of votes that have come in, a lot of polls still have not closed, especially out on the western side of the United States. But right now, these are the numbers just based on what's coming in. It's 54% for former President Donald Trump, 44% for Vice President Kamala Harris. But again, it is very early on.
In addition to those two states being called for former President Trump and one state being called for Vice President Kamala Harris, we do know the results of the Indiana governor's race.
We do, and we can take you to that right now. In fact, this was called really pretty early, Rob.
Yeah, and as you can see, Mike Braun is now, according to our decision desk, the governor-elect of Indiana. Jennifer McCormick unable to unseat him.
And it's worth noting, this is based on just 16% of the vote coming in, and they called it even before that.
Yes. So, what we're learning, Tricia, is that the information on our board is updating minute by minute.
Quite literally.
Changes and it updates very quickly.
Yeah, Tricia, we'll send it back to you, though, for right now.
Got you covered all night long. We're going to continue to watch the local and national. You can download that app at any time. We'll be here all night long. Hope to see you soon.
Fox 19 Now stays with this breaking story on the Fox 19 Now app. Download it from the App Store and Google Play.
Okay, everybody, we are back. Just had a little bit of a break there, but we are following some new updates, Rob, right here on the map.
Okay, so we've been talking about the swing states, right? We already told you about Georgia. It's leaning red. We told you earlier about Virginia. It's leaning blue. And then now we're learning another battleground state, North Carolina, is leaning blue as well. So let's take a closer look at that. Not even 2% of the votes in. But as you can see, a number of counties reporting, or a number of precincts reporting in that state.
And I noticed this too, Rob. This is obviously not a surprise at all, but Ohio is now leaning red. I mean, this is anticipated now.
So let's look at the counties in our area. Just to set the scene, Hamilton, Brown, Claremont, and Brown, right? So when you go north, one is Butler, and one is Warren.
Wow, Warren's coming in already.
And Clinton. So let's look at this again. So that's the one that's coming in. It's Warren County, 53% of the vote in, and as you can see, it's leaning red.
Yeah. And it makes sense that we're kind of starting to see this really come in rather quickly because the polls have now been closed in Ohio for about 10 minutes. And so we'll continue to see that.
And unlike Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, Ohio does start counting votes. It already has, or starts processing them.
Right.
Before today, so they can get ahead of the vote.
Exactly.
Or else we'll be waiting all night for the results.
I'll take a peek here to see if we have any numbers when it comes to some of the local races. At last check, I didn't see any. Okay, we do now. So this is an update. I mean, keep in mind, this is only 1.5% coming in here, but so far, 52% going for Bernie Moreno, 44% for Sherrod Brown. We've expected this to be a tight race, Rob.
Yeah, and if you go back to Ohio, as we take a closer look, Sherrod Brown is going to benefit from the urban areas, right?
Right.
And that hasn't come in yet. Hamilton, Franklin County, Columbus, and Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland, and Toledo as well.
And I know, too, we've got live reporters out in the field in a bunch of different areas. So we've got Brady Williams. He is following the Bernie Moreno campaign. We've got Ken Brown following the Sherrod Brown campaign. No relation there, to be clear. They do have the same last name, but they are not related. And so we want to hopefully go out to them live here in just a minute. I want to make sure, I believe this is the shot here. So they might just be getting ready. I'm just waiting to see to make sure that they're good to go. But they are live. I believe that the Sherrod Brown campaign, Rob, is in Columbus. The Bernie Moreno campaign is in Cleveland. And obviously we'll be watching this closely tonight because if they are able to call the race tonight, that's typically where we would see them potentially speak, whether they're accepting or conceding.
We should also mention that former President Donald Trump is watching the returns come in at Mar-a-Lago. Vice President Kamala Harris is choosing to watch it at Howard University, her alma mater. If she is elected, she'll be the first HBCU graduate to become President of the United States.
Yeah, and I'm just keeping an eye behind us to make sure that nothing else has popped up. Is this significant, Rob? Did this change from leaning to called, or was that called already?
So West Virginia is what we're talking about. So at 7:30 is when Ohio, West Virginia, and North Carolina closed its polls.
So that was rather quick.
And they immediately called West Virginia for former President Trump, because I guess it's reliably red.
And we're slowly starting to see more of these eastern states. And I mean, it almost feels like the map is going to slowly just fill up this way based on just the polling times and when they close.
Correct. So we are waiting on Pennsylvania too, Michigan, Wisconsin.
And I know you mentioned too, Rob, Nevada, Arizona, they are considered battleground states too, still, right?
They are, even though the latest, and I think it was a New York Times poll, had President Trump, the latest poll had him up by 4 points in Arizona, so we will watch that closely. But the thing about Arizona is the most of the voters in the state of Arizona are in Maricopa County. So that's the county we're going to be watching the closest.
Okay, so we're going to be keeping an eye on that. But right now, we do want to take you back to that Senate race here in Ohio, Sherrod Brown versus Bernie Moreno. Our Brady Williams is actually live right now. He is up in the Cleveland area at the Bernie Moreno campaign. Brady, we want to take it out to you. Can you set the scene for us? What is it like there? What is the atmosphere like? I know you've been doing a lot of research on Bernie Moreno.
Yeah, so the music just started, so that's a good sign for their campaign, I suppose. Folks really started trickling in about a half hour ago. A lot of folks were at the polls for this. We're told that Bernie Moreno himself probably won't come in until pretty close to the election being called. We actually just saw just a few moments ago, they had up on the big screen some of the early results. We're leaning towards Bernie, so they were cheering for that. It's less than 1% of that vote that's in so far right now. And again, this is going to be a very serious thing. The whole nation is going to be watching this seat specifically because there has been so much money in advertising poured into this race. This is something that's going to have a lot of effects on people because there are a lot of high-stakes issues that have been discussed throughout this campaign. Chief among them are things like abortions. Bernie Moreno lists on his website wanting to ban late-term abortions, while Sherrod Brown is more interested in protecting access to abortion. Things like that. The border has been a big issue as well in all of this. Education, educational choice. Bernie Moreno specifically got involved in politics because of schools shutting down during COVID. That is something that has been marked throughout his entire campaign. We actually spoke with his campaign manager, who says they are feeling pretty good about the way things are going here so far. So we're just keeping an eye on things as folks start to trickle in throughout the evening here.
And Brady, you mentioned that like nearly $500 million has been sent on this election, a statewide election, because it got so much national attention. The same thing is happening down in Texas with Ted Cruz and Colin Allred. That's also getting a lot of national attention. That's the reason why they spent so much money, because they felt like they had a chance, right?
Yeah, it's something where they A, feel they have a chance, and B, feel that this is a seat that they really need. They really do, as Republicans, want to take over the Senate, regardless of what happens with the presidential election here. They feel it's one that they can win because folks have felt that way with Sherrod Brown before. They felt that he is a vulnerable candidate in this seat, and maybe this is the chance to take him over now that there are things like low approval ratings for folks like Joe Biden, things like that. So they feel it's maybe an opportunity to get into the Senate here in Ohio.
Brady, do you have any word on when we could expect Bernie Moreno to show up at that campaign headquarters?
Yeah, you know, we've asked about that a few different times. He's really watching with his family right now, so they're going to wait for more of those results to go in. Previous elections I've covered, I know a lot of the times they'll wait until kind of late in that process. You know, polls just closed down, so they're going to watch some of the results come in as a family so that they can kind of process some of that, and then they'll come in and they'll address all of the campaign donors, all the supporters who are actually here. So if I had to put a number on it, I would say probably closer to 9 o'clock, something like that. But of course, as soon as we actually know, we're going to come to you guys here on Fox 19.
Brady Williams reporting live from Cleveland at the Bernie Moreno headquarters there. Brady, thank you very much. We should mention that Ken Brown is covering the other side of this race. He's hanging out with Sherrod Brown's crowd in Columbus, correct?
Yeah, and I think we should be able to go to Ken sometime here shortly. We're just waiting on him to get everything set up. But once he is, obviously, we'll cover that other side as well. We know that, again, you mentioned this earlier, Rob, but if you're just joining us, I mean, Sherrod Brown is very well known in Ohio. He's been a politician for a really long time.
Yeah, first elected in 2007, but that's also, it was a different type of state in terms of politics, right? Because back then, Ohio was swingy. It went for Barack Obama twice before going for President Trump twice. So that could explain why he's worried about his seat. And with how many percent? 3.5% in.
So it's gone up a little bit,
yeah,
but there's still not a lot. I mean, and these numbers still feel close to me. I mean, I don't know. It still feels like a toss-up, and obviously this race has not been called. And with only 3.5% in, I don't know that it will be for some time.
So we're going to continue to follow that as well. Let's check on issue 2.
Okay, Kentucky Amendment 2.
Because
we're thinking Ohio issue 1. Oh, actually 3.9%, issue 1, that is, so this is the gerrymandering redistricting one. This is worth mentioning, Rob. Looks like so far no, but again, that's only about 4% of the vote coming in on Ohio issue 1.
So Ohio issue 1 would take the redistricting process out of the hands of lawmakers and put it in the hand of a commission that's chosen by retired judges. It would be made up of 5 independents, 5 Republicans, and 5 Democrats, and they would be in charge of drawing districts.
Yeah, and this is another one that people have been pretty passionate about. There were a lot of people who think that it would be really good for Ohio, that it would eliminate gerrymandering. The other side has argued that it would actually cause gerrymandering.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to see how this issue does play out, Rob. We can go through and see if we've got any numbers on some of these. This is early, though, for Hamilton County being a local county. So we're not seeing anything yet on prosecutor or sheriff. We can check on a couple of these House races. Nothing yet on Landsman Sansa. We do have some numbers here. Just want to mention this one. This is District 2, about 6% in. We are seeing the Republican in this case, David Taylor, with 64% based on, just jumped up to 66% with 8% of the vote. And then if we want to go to District 8, which again, these are local, no quite numbers there on that one yet. But this is that one we're keeping a really close eye on, Rob, and it is slowly kind of trickling in when it comes to the Senate race.
And let's go to the House race again with District 1. Okay, so we don't have any numbers here yet because Ohio's 1st Congressional District is made up of all Cincinnati and the eastern suburbs in Hamilton County, including Anderson Township, Montgomery, Indian Hill, Madera, Blue Ash, as well as all of Warren County.
Yeah.
And we don't have those numbers in yet, so.
And it's interesting to point out there, Rod, that obviously Hamilton County tends to go blue, Warren County tends to go red.
Correct.
So we'll have to see how it plays out with this race in particular. I do believe that our Ken Brown, who is live again in the Columbus area at the Sherrod Brown campaign, should be ready here in just a moment to go out to him. Ken, we just talked with Brady, kind of asked him to set the scene where he is in Cleveland. Can you do the same for us? What is the vibe there in Columbus at the Sherrod Brown campaign so far?
Yeah, so we're at the Hyatt Regency here in Columbus, and they're just now letting people in. The doors to this event opened at 7:30. We got in a little earlier today to set up equipment around 2 o'clock this afternoon, and then they shut things down 4 o'clock for a security sweep through this area. And you may not be able to see many people behind me here now. That's because they are getting checked in. They're slowly working their way in the doors here. They've got the music playing. They've got things going. And, this is a very tight race for this Senate seat here in Ohio. And, Brown is the incumbent in this race. He's not only been elected to this position, but he's also been reelected to this position twice, looking for a third term here, or a fourth term rather, his third time being reelected. We were told earlier today that he cast his ballot up in the Cleveland area alongside his wife, and then he was slowly working his way down here to Columbus, and the results will slowly start to come in. At this point, it looks like it's just 4% reporting, mostly rural counties reporting, with Bernie Moreno actually in the lead in the numbers that I had seen initially coming out here. But this is very, very early in things. We expect this to be a very, very tight race throughout the evening. And this campaign and this camp here will be keeping a very close eye on those numbers as they roll in county by county. Reporting live in Columbus, Ken Brown, Fox 19 Now.
Hey, Ken, have you got any word on when we could expect Sherrod Brown to show up at where you are right now?
No, haven't got any word on a time that he may be here, when and if he may speak ahead of anything being called. And we're really waiting to hear more from his campaign on that. At this point, our communication with them has been that he cast his ballot in Cleveland. He's coming down to Columbus, and then they just got us checked in and in the door, essentially. Not much along the lines of his day or what's going to happen beyond that, but as we get it, we'll continue to let you know.
Ken Brown reporting live in Columbus. Ken, thank you very much.
Yeah, Ken, thank you. And these are the numbers again. I mean, it did just jump up again, Rob. Now
7%.
We're talking 7% here, and it looks like it shifted slightly. I think Sherrod Brown was at 44, now he's at 45, but we really expect this to be a very close race.
So, since these numbers are updating, let's go back to the state of Ohio and see if we can glean anything from the numbers we're getting in the state, which is still leaning red. Okay, so we're getting more, right?
Right.
Not any in our area except for Warren County, which has 53% of the votes in. I'm a little colorblind. Is that solidly red or is that leaning red?
I believe that is calling it.
Okay.
I mean, because it looks like that darker red. It is tough to tell when you can't compare them to the other colors, but to me that looks like they've called it.
So, and that is just for Warren County. It's not for the entire state. We still have all these counties down here. And then we do have new information on some of the other counties that are reporting.
Right.
So I'm just going to point out the blue counties.
Lucas.
Lucas County is Toledo. And then, what county is this? Mahoning County,
And
with 42% of the votes in. Okay, so we're going to keep watching Ohio in terms of as the votes come in. But the other thing that I want to point out is North Carolina is leaning blue. That's a battleground state. Georgia is leaning red, another battleground state.
Right.
And as you can see, they both have 16 electoral votes.
And what is the percentages again on those, Rob, right now? Do we know how many votes? Okay, so only 2.6%.
Okay.
So pretty early on that one.
So let's check Virginia, 20.
Okay.
And then, so while we're there, let's check these other 3 states that are leaning. South Carolina, about 10% in. Georgia, 20% in.
Interesting. And we got a couple leanings that haven't been called quite yet.
And then, but again, you're going to look for a cluster of blue here.
Right.
And then let's go to Florida. Florida has 30 electoral votes, 80% of the vote in.
So I would expect this could be called far sooner than some of the other battlegrounds, just based on how many votes are already in.
Yes, and the thing about, so these are all out, right? The panhandle of Florida is reliably red. So if you were going to use history as your guide,
right,
you could deduce that many of these are going to go red. It's a big military area.
Right.
It leans heavily to the right. So we'll keep watching that for you too.
And I'm going to jump back just for a second, Rob, to see if we have any new numbers here, because I want to make sure we're keeping a close eye on some of these other state and local races as well. Not a significant jump on this one. Are we seeing anything yet? No. But I do think, Rob, we could here share a story on some of these local races while we're kind of waiting for some of the presidential results to come in. So our Mike Schell has followed a lot of these specific local races. I can tell you that he, I believe, did a story on both the sheriff's race as well as a couple of the other races as well.
And I just want to point something out.
Yeah.
So this is the race for Hamilton County Sheriff, right? And this is the reason why we don't have any numbers back, because we do have numbers from Ohio, but what we don't have are numbers from Hamilton County.
Exactly.
And that race is decided in Hamilton County, and we don't have any numbers back, so that might be a while before we get those numbers, even though we're getting numbers back from other precincts in other counties in Ohio.
100%. And while we're waiting on some of those votes to come in, we're going to play for you now. This is a story, again, put together by our Fox 19 reporter, Mike Schell. This is just highlighting the Hamilton County Sheriff's race between Charmaine McGuffey and Jim Neal.
It is a unique race for Hamilton County Sheriff in this election. A first-term sheriff is running against a former sheriff whom she defeated. But now he wants his old job back. Both Sheriff Charmaine McGuffey and former Sheriff Jim Neal have decades of experience with the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. McGuffey is the incumbent. She has served 35 years with the Sheriff's Office and is the first woman and first member of the LGBTQ+ community to hold the office. Both candidates told me that the safety of Hamilton County residents comes first in their duties as sheriff, followed by the administration of the county jail, a close second.
Well, you know, I've worked in that jail for many years, and everybody knows. Again, I'm law and order. The prisoners know it, the deputies know it, everybody knows it. We're all going to follow the rules, and that's exactly what people who are incarcerated understand as they come into this facility. We enforce the rules. We will. And we will also be fair.
In July, Sheriff McGuffey showed us the massive remodeling project going on at the Hamilton County Justice Center.
Would you say that was one of your biggest accomplishments thus far?
Oh, it's certainly not the only accomplishment I've had, but it was a very heavy lift. It was a $20 million redo, and we're still finished touching it up and getting more and more of it done. But yeah, I think taking this jail from a very deteriorated institution to something that's state-of-the-art.
Former Sheriff Jim Neal is trying to unseat the person who won the job in 2020. Neal was the Hamilton County Sheriff from 2013 to 2021. He served with the Sheriff's Office since 1981. Neal won election twice as a Democrat, but is now running as a Republican. Like Sheriff McGuffey, Neal focuses on the jail administration and keeping order among the inmates.
What I expect of them is to follow the rules of the institution. What they expect of me is to provide them with security, provide them with protection from other criminal violations that could occur in the county jail.
In your 8 years as sheriff, is there one or two accomplishments that stand out above the rest?
The accomplishment I'm very proud of is the cooperation and operation, working with all of law enforcement in Hamilton County. It's a force multiplier when you do that because you're sharing resources, including human resources, to be more efficient and effective in combating and fighting crime. And also, the collaborations went beyond just law enforcement. We collaborated with the Talbert House. We collaborated with private individuals as well that had awesome ideas.
Final question, and quite simply, why should the voters of Hamilton County elect you as sheriff again?
You should vote for me because I delivered on every promise I made for my first tenure. And for the next tenure, I want a better Hamilton County, a safer Hamilton County, a Hamilton County that's fiscally responsible with their money, which I am, balanced budget every year, and also a sheriff's office that brings forward a properly modeled and properly staffed institution. And we can say that, and almost no other police agency in the region can. We're properly staffed. I put 80 certified officers out, additional with my staffing model, and I intend to double that in the future. So a safer Hamilton County, and I am a proven leader.
Why do you want to be the sheriff of Hamilton County again?
I'm determined to make Hamilton County a safer place to raise your family, a safer place to open your doors for business, and a safer place to enjoy life. At the rate we're going, it's just a matter of time. It's not going to be safe to attend a concert, a Bengals game, a Reds game, a soccer game. It's just not going to be safe. And so I'm determined. A father of 2 young boys, and many of us are raising families. We owe it to the youth to protect them and provide a safe community.
Both candidates do agree on one thing, and that is to get out and vote on or before Election Day on November 5th. In studio, Mike Schell, Fox 19 Now.
And so we just clicked over to 8 o'clock, and here are the states that are closing their polls. And with these states, there are 171 electoral votes up for grabs. Alabama, Connecticut, D.C., Delaware, Florida, Illinois, Maine. We should point out that Maine is a split vote. That's why it looks differently than the other. They split the number of people that they have. But, yeah, point it out.
I was just shocked to see this because we've seen it red for so long. We're now starting to see this one has been called now officially. And now Ohio is leaning blue with 21% of the vote. But it looks like some of those blue counties are coming in, including
Hamilton County. What are we at? 36%.
36%.
Okay. So we'll continue to follow that. But it could go back to leaning red.
Because Texas is going blue. We know Georgia went blue, flipped red. So we've seen several states flip back and forth quite a bit.
Correct, but it's really early in the process.
Right.
Maine splits their electoral votes. Maine and Nebraska are the only 2 states that do that. We have Florida closed there, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Mississippi. A lot of them, right? The other thing we're going to be watching is Michigan. Even though the Upper Peninsula is Central Time, we should start getting numbers from Michigan in terms of the bottom hand part this hour as well, between 8 and 9.
And it looks like they just called Tennessee. Looks like they just called it for former President Donald Trump.
Yeah, because there's a check mark.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's showing that there's 0% of the votes in, but it did just pop up as fully red. So it looks like, again, based on what the decision desk knows, the voting trends, the data, whatever they're seeing, they are already calling that one. And Pennsylvania just popped up. Isn't that new, Rob? I don't think we had any numbers yet from there. Only 2% in. Just one county, it looks like.
One county. Allegheny County, so that would be Pittsburgh.
Okay. And that's anticipated, right? Typically, that urban area does tend to go blue.
The state of Pennsylvania is largely red, except for 2 blue strongholds. That's Pittsburgh and the Philadelphia area. So we will continue to watch this state as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because again, in Cambria County, let's see if I can find it. In Cambria County, right there. In Cambria County, there was a problem with the ballots. So what happened was the machine couldn't scan them, so they had to reissue ballots. And so people in Cambria County can vote until 10 o'clock tonight. So that's how long it's going to be before we get results from that county.
Rob, here in a minute, we are going to go out to our Megan O'Rourke. So right before we do, I wanted to check the numbers here to see if we do happen to have any. So this is the race, and we do. This is significant and interesting, in fact. Now, this is based on 17% of the vote, but this is, again, the race for U.S. House. This is District 1 in Ohio. Greg Landsman, 39% of the vote. Orlando Sanza, 60% of the vote. Rob, our Megan O'Rourke is out covering this race now. We want to go out to her live. Obviously, Megan, these are really early numbers, but what is the atmosphere where you are? Have you actually seen Greg Landsman? I know that you're with his campaign right now.
Yeah, Jess, we are here at Queen City Exchange. It's pretty empty right now. You can see the podium's just set up. He is expected to make his appearance later. I'm told he is not here right now. He's watching the results someplace off-site. People are beginning to trickle in the door. I talked to somebody with his campaign a little bit ago. They said they're expecting somewhere between 150 and 180 supporters here tonight. I would say right now there's probably 30 or 40 here. So it's just, very early in the evening. You just gave those early voting numbers, about 60% to 39% in support of Landsman. So again, very early as far as the results are going. And I want to talk a little bit about Landsman. He is a freshman representative right now, vying for that second term in office for another 2 years. He's running against Republican Orlando Sanza. So again, we are expecting him to be here sometime this evening. I'm not sure when that's going to be, but we're told he will take the stage. He'll give his speech here. We're going to be here for the entire evening until that happens, and we'll keep you posted. But again, right now, it's still very early for these election results. We're just kind of taking our place and waiting to see what happens.
Megan, how confident are they? I mean, when we look at the numbers, and mind you, fewer than 20% of the votes have been counted, but right now, Orlando Sanza is beating incumbent Greg Landsman. We should mention only 40% of the vote in Hamilton County has been counted. Do they seem confident they can pull off a win?
I think that the feeling is that a lot of those results may be coming in more from Warren County at this point, and they're waiting to see that push when more of the Hamilton County votes start coming in. I would say confident is probably a good term.
Megan, thank you very much. She's going to stay there. If Greg Landsman shows up, we'll go right to you.
All right, Megan, thank you. Yeah, and those numbers, I've been watching them. It hasn't jumped too much either, Rob, so it looks like these are really kind of trickling in Hamilton County. Let's give this a look. Still nothing yet on the prosecutor's race, which is kind of interesting because we've seen some Hamilton County numbers, but nothing yet on sheriff either. Those are two that we're watching closely. Let's check issue 1. So now we've got 25% in for this. This is close.
It's very close.
This is very, very close. This is, again, that redistricting, gerrymandering amendment that people are very passionate about here, and those numbers are tight at this point based on that 25% that's in so far.
Correct. So we'll continue to watch that for you because, as you can see, it's on a razor's edge right there.
Okay, this is a jump we've had here. So we're now up to 20% in when it comes to the Senate race here in Ohio, and we've now seen incumbent Sherrod Brown take the lead. Bernie Moreno, Rob, was in the lead before when we had less votes in.
Correct. So let's go back to the state of Ohio.
And
let's see what counties came in.
Right. That'll help paint this picture for us.
Correct.
And Texas just switched to a toss-up. Worth mentioning that there, too.
So 28% of the votes in, and Sherrod Brown is going to be in Columbus.
Right.
Right? So that's 38.5% of the vote there. And then in Hamilton County, what did we say, 25%? 36.8%, right?
And it looks like this one is in, which this is Butler, right? So
Butler County.
And they're calling that now for former President Donald Trump.
And then let's see Cuyahoga County. 33% in.
Leaning blue. Okay.
So there's still a lot of vote out, though.
There is. There's a lot still. And I mean, these are all, this one just came up here. So again, this is part of Michigan, but we're just now starting to see some more numbers here, which is interesting. There's only one county so far, 1.9%, but they're already saying blue.
So let's click on this county. So
Oakland
County is the rich suburb just north of Detroit.
Okay.
Detroit is Wayne County.
No votes in
This
from
is Oakland County, the northern suburbs of Detroit, and I think This is Macomb County.
Okay.
We will watch that too. It's heavily Republican.
Okay.
And if you don't know this, Macomb County is where the Reagan Democrats were born. That was one of the first times that a bunch of Democrats voted for a Republican president, and that happened in Macomb County. So we'll continue to watch that too.
I know too, Rob, we should be anticipating here in a moment here. He's getting ready, but our Mike Shell, we were talking about this earlier. He's covered a lot of the Hamilton County races specifically, which again, at last check, unless it has suddenly changed, we haven't seen any numbers coming. Oh, okay. We've just gotten numbers now on the prosecutor race, although it says 0 of 562 reporting, so it's hard to kind of gauge what we're basing this off of. But right now it does have Connie Pillich in the lead.
Right, but only like less than 200,000 votes.
Right, so that's still early on. Let's check the sheriff's race because I know this is what Mike Shell is actively covering tonight. And we are seeing, again, based on very early numbers, that current Sheriff Charmaine McGuffey is in the lead, 63% to Jim Neal with 37%. Our Mike Shell, I believe, Rob, is currently right now with the Jim Neal campaign. He's been bouncing around, continuing to follow this race. Mike, I know you got the chance. We played your story earlier to sit down with both candidates. You're with Jim Neal now. What is the atmosphere there that these early numbers have come in? I mean, they're early, but right now it does show Charmaine McGuffey leading this.
Yeah, Jessica, Sheriff Jim Neal, this is one of the most unique races in Hamilton County. You have Jim Neal, who was a sheriff from 2013 to 2021. Charmaine McGuffey defeated him for this past term, and now he is back looking to regain his seat. He ran as a Democrat before. Now he's running as a Republican. He said that the Democrat Party gave his endorsement to McGuffey. Two different styles, perhaps, of being the sheriff. Jim Neal, when he was sheriff, more or less looking at bolstering the police force, the sheriff's force, and adding officers, where Sheriff McGuffey, still that is a priority for her, but she too is looking to upgrade the jail in new technology and things like that. We did see that she had put a $20 million plan into effect to refurbish part of the Hamilton County Jail, new paint, new windows, things of that nature. She says that would make it safer not only for the inmates, but also for the sheriff's officers there at the jail. So yeah, a little bit of lead for Charmaine McGuffey right now. Anything can happen, and Jim Neal is here. Charmaine McGuffey, she is actually right across the street here. We are at the Cincinnati Police FOP Hall. She's at the OTR Stillhouse, so we'll probably pop over there and get some comments from her. So, Jessica, we'll send it back to you.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. You see the numbers once again behind us in terms of the race for Hamilton County Sheriff. Right. Charmaine McGuffey, the current sheriff, is leading with 98,000 votes. Jim Neal has 57,000 votes and change. But once again, 0 out of 562 precincts reporting.
Let's check what the president is saying here, Rob. I mean, this is, again, though, this is tough to say because this is really based on such early numbers and really just what we're seeing in those eastern states. I do want to check the Senate again as well because this is,
tight.
This has been such a close race. Every time we check this, I think almost every time it has bounced a little bit. 49% to 47 with 26% of the votes in. This is hotly contested, and we knew it would be going into it.
So when I talk to, people have always said, Sherrod Brown's going to have a problem, he's going to have a problem in terms of retaining his seat. But this is the first time that political observers say that his seat is really in jeopardy for the first time, and he's held the seat for 3 terms. He's going for his 4th.
And we've talked about this a lot, but just the amount of money that has been poured into the 2 campaigns here. I mean, we've all seen the ads. If you live in Ohio, you've seen ads for both sides. There has been so much money put into this campaign by both of these candidates. And so we'll just have to see how this pans out as this continues to come in.
Because this is a race, even though it's statewide, it got a lot of national attention because Democrats are trying to hold control of the Senate.
Right.
So this is a very important race. The other statewide race that has gotten the attention of national observers, and it's leaning red again, is the state of Texas because Ted Cruz has found an opponent in Colin Allred, who's a former congressman and a football player, and they're kind of neck and neck.
Interesting.
And so we'll have to figure that out. Also,
this has flipped several times too. It was blue, then it was a toss-up, and now it's leaning red.
yeah, it's leaning red again. So we'll continue to follow that for you as well.
Just monitoring here to see if there's any new updates. So Ohio is still looking like it's leaning blue, but again, these are still pretty early numbers.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania is still leaning blue as well, and then some of those other states still leaning. It looks like we're still waiting on some of these local counties.
Claremont County's not in.
Brown County doesn't have any in, but again, some of them do. I mean, Hamilton's still at about 36%. So
We're going to continue to follow that for you.
yeah, absolutely. I want to check too. Let's see if there's no significant updates here. I wanted to just give one more look at the Landsman-Sansa race.
Yeah,
and
let's
see
look
if
at
we've
it.
got an update on that one. Okay, so 17%. I think this is right about where we were. So we're not seeing really a significant update so far when it comes to this race.
Correct. And we do have Brenda Ordonez going up to his camp right now, so we should hear from her and see what that scene looks like. Of course, Megan O'Rourke, we just heard from her. She's at Landsman's camp as the results come in.
Yeah, we have some other reporters that we will be going to shortly. You've already heard from some of them if you've been watching, but we do know that we're also going to have our Chancellor Wynn covering the Hamilton County prosecutor's race, which of course everyone in Hamilton County is really invested in. So we'll be able to go to him soon as well. I want to, Rob, take a minute to play again one of our Washington, D.C. Bureau packages from our great TV station. They put together some nice stories about some of the really most important topics in the community, and there's been so many of them. We did one on the economy earlier. I think border security has been important to a lot of people. This package was put together again by reporter Stetson Miller. You heard from him earlier, but this is, again, Stetson Miller with our Washington, D.C. Bureau talking about the presidential candidate's take on border security. So we'll play that for you now.
Vice President Harris and former President Trump have very different ideas about how to tackle border security and illegal immigration. How they approach those issues could be deciding factors for many voters as we get closer to November.
I know the importance of safety and security, especially at our border.
We will seal the border, stop the invasion, and launch the largest deportation effort in American history.
The border has been front and center in Washington this year after the country saw record levels of illegal border crossings under the Biden administration. And despite crossings dropping dramatically in recent months, it's continuing to be a major election year talking point for both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump.
They're pouring in, and many of them are the worst people in those countries.
Trump's border plans outlined on his campaign website include to end so-called catch-and-release policies and restore Remain in Mexico, while the Harris-Walz campaign promises to bring back the Senate's bipartisan border security deal that they say Trump killed. And they also say her record shows that the border has long been a priority for her.
As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border.
Mark Morgan, the former acting commissioner of Customs and Border Protection under the Trump administration, says whoever the next president is, he believes they shouldn't be framing this as a red or blue issue.
We have to start with trying to tap down the ideologic and political driven perceptions of the border, right? And the lies and the false narratives.
Immigrant advocate groups like Global Refugee agree reforming border security policy is key, but so is immigration policy.
There is an opportunity for political leaders to put, election season politics aside and to realize that American voters, they want solutions. They want us to figure out how do we have an orderly system where we know who's coming across our southern border, while we also realize that we are an immigrant nation.
In Washington, I'm Stetson Miller.
So that was, again, our Stetson Miller there reporting from our D.C. Bureau on the presidential race.
So we are going to check back in with Brittany Harry because she is at the Hamilton County Board of Elections. This is my question for her. We know that in Hamilton County, 102,000 votes have been cast for Kamala Harris, 55,000 and change for former President Donald Trump. All right. What I want to know is how many outstanding votes are there in Hamilton County so we can get a better gauge of what this looks like moving forward.
Right. That would give us some perspective
Correct.
for sure, because it looks like, 37%. I don't know. It's hard to gauge, and she would have a better idea there. So once she's ready, we'll go out live to her to try to get an update from the Hamilton County Board of Elections. I don't know. Have we seen any updates on this map, Rob, when it comes to The rest of the United States.
Oh, so yeah, let's talk about some of the states that have been called so far. Connecticut has been called for Kamala Harris, but as you can see, like half a percentage, half a point in. Massachusetts, that's also new. The only thing there is, what is that, Martha's Vineyard? Yeah.
Just that one.
And Nantucket, that's it, Martha's Vineyard. And then Rhode Island has been called. Also, Maryland has been called for Kamala Harris.
Okay.
Florida is now firmly red.
Called for Trump.
Along with Oklahoma. And you asked me, like, what's the deal
Right.
with Iowa? Iowa has gotten a lot of attention this week because over the weekend, a reliable poll, was released by a woman there. And in the beginning, when it was Donald Trump and President Biden, he was down by 14 points.
Right.
And it just came out over the weekend that Kamala Harris is up by 4 points, according to that poll. So the question becomes, if there's that type of gain here by Kamala Harris,
right,
and this is an incredibly red state, will she see the benefits and gains in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania,
right,
which also can be red, but they're not as red as Iowa.
Right.
So that's what people are watching as well. And we should mention that right here is our time, right? East Coast time. Up here is Central time. So keep that in mind. We're not going to see any votes from here, but honestly, there are only 3 counties up there anyway.
Yeah, I know there were some. If I'm not mistaken, it might be Arizona, Rob, where the poll was closed technically at 10 Eastern.
Yes.
So it won't even be until 10 o'clock here that we get any results from some of the states out here. I'm curious. I just want to know how many votes are in. So we got about 43% in Georgia, leaning toward Trump at this point in time, and then Pennsylvania leaning toward Harris with about 7.2%. So still some early numbers in both of those battleground states. And we've seen, again, the flex back and forth repeatedly.
And the thing is, you know, people are asking, like, how long is it going to be before we find out the winner of this election? Well, if either candidate can get a couple of states between them,
right,
then Pennsylvania might become less important, because I think we're going to be waiting a long time for Pennsylvania, right? So if Trump could win, let's say, because this is leaning red, if Trump could win Georgia, in some other states that give you results early, we could find out earlier in the night. But if we're all waiting on Pennsylvania, it could be days before we figure it out. Same thing with Kamala Harris, if she's able to eke out a win in North Carolina, which Trump carried in 2020.
So we are seeing, I mean, this is slowly starting to come in. Want to jump back just for a second to see if we've got any updates on any of these races. So again, there's the presidential look. Let's check the Senate. So we're up to about 30% now, and we've seen a jump again.
Yeah.
Another shift now with Bernie Moreno in the lead. This is at least 3 to 4 times now this has gone back and forth, Rob. I mean, it really is going back and forth. And then let's just check on these Hamilton County races. Okay, so we don't know, again, how many precincts are in. It says 0, but we are seeing some numbers coming in. Small, though, I would say, right, for the size of the county.
Agreed.
Mean, given the amount of people who turned out to vote. And let's check on the sheriff's race as well. Okay, so we're still seeing Charmaine McGuffey in the lead there. I think, Rob, here shortly, we should be able to go to Brittany Harry at the Board of Elections to give us a little bit of an update on some of this, because I'm wondering if she can tell us more about why this is saying 0 when we are seeing some numbers. Brittany, if you can hear us, do you have any updates from the Board of Elections there as far as how many votes have come in so far and what things are looking like there?
Well, Jess, so actually not right now at this point. It's actually still pretty quiet here. I don't think that things have really gotten, picked up yet at this point. The polls just closed at 7:30, but it's 8:30 right now. So let me see if I can find the director here and see if maybe she'd be able to provide an update, because I'm looking online, I'm refreshing my pages as well, just trying to look up any new information, and it's kind of slow behind me here still. So let me check on that, and hopefully I can come back here in just a moment with another update for you.
Brittany, I have a question for you. In terms of Jessica and I doing our jobs, it would be easier to do if we knew how many votes were cast in Hamilton County. Then we'll have a better idea of what the numbers look like and what direction they can go if we knew how many votes were still outstanding. Do you know how many votes were cast in Hamilton County?
Yeah, so, the questioner, the thing at this point really is that it was, record-breaking numbers. So we had like 90,000 early in-person votes, and they were projecting a turnout of 70 to 74%. And so we got to just under 70 is what I have seen. And actually, so I can open it online really quick and see and check just the Board of Elections website. And so for on election day, it's showing 237,191 to 58.4%, and then absentee 168,715. That's at 41.6%. And as I mentioned, total turnout 67.18%.
Very much. We will come back to you throughout the evening.
Yeah, Brittany, thank you. So we'll hopefully be able to check in with her again. This is slowly inching up here, Rob. I mean, I think we just went up another just percentage point there, but a lot of these, I mean, this is still saying 0 at this point. This looks about the same as where it was. We knew that Warren Davidson was leading. Okay, they have called this race, so do want to share this with you. U.S. House District 2, our decision desk, Ray, has called this for Republican David Taylor with 69% of the vote based on 41% in. This race has been called right now. Let's check here. I'll take us back quickly. And just here in a minute, we are going to do another live cut-in on air. We're going to send things over to Tricia Mackey, but just want to check on this for you before we do go back into the studio there to see if there's any updates. Ohio, a toss-up.
So it was leaning red.
Yep.
Then it was leaning blue, and now it's being called a toss-up. It's about 38% of the votes in right now.
Interesting. We're just seeing so many things change, and it just goes to show truly how fluid an election can be and how quickly things can change in a matter of seconds.
Correct. And the other thing, too, we're still trying to figure out, so in terms of votes counted in Hamilton County, we're at 60,000. The question is, how many more votes are out there? We're going to try to get to the bottom of that. I'm going to go online and try to look myself as well.
Yeah, because it doesn't quite tell us that. I mean, this is still, though, a great tool. It does paint us a picture of what the direction that things are heading, rather. I'm curious, what one is this? It's the toss-up. Delaware County. Okay.
So Delaware County is a suburb of Franklin County and Columbus.
Okay. So we are about to quickly cut in here and take things over to Tricia Mackey in the studio.
Now, this is Election 2024.
Fox 19 now continuing to track the biggest local races as well as the presidential race for you all evening long. The polls in Ohio have been closed for about an hour now, so we're starting to see more results from across the tri-state start to pour in. One of the biggest races we are keeping a close eye is Ohio's U.S. Senate race. It could play a huge role in which party controls the U.S. Senate in 2025. We have seen the lead switch back and forth between the Democratic incumbent Sherrod Brown and Republican challenger Bernie Moreno. So it is definitely too early to call. As you can see right now, if you're looking at the numbers, just neck and neck, could go either way, but only 38.9% of the votes are in right now. We have team coverage of this race. Ken Brown is in Columbus with the Democratic incumbent Senator Sherrod Brown's campaign. Brady Williams is in Cleveland with Republican challenger Bernie Moreno's campaign. Ken, let's kick it off with you, shall we?
Tim Walz as the next president and vice president. And we're going to keep the Senate because Sherrod Brown is going to win. And Joyce Beatty and Marcy Kaplan.
So we're having a little bit of a difficulty with that. I do believe, can we go to Bernie Moreno's as well? Perhaps we have that, his challenger right now. Maybe we could get that live as well.
Hey, yeah, so here we are. We're with Bernie Moreno's campaign. Things are starting to pick up here. If we actually zoom out, I'm very short, but you can see there's lots of people around here. This has officially entered the standing room portion of the evening as folks are finally getting in here. A lot of folks were waiting for more polls to close, waiting to get all that taken care of before they come in here. But now, full regalia, everyone in the Republican Party is here tonight. We're hearing lots of different cheering for different races that are coming in so far. We are also probably the biggest reaction that we've seen so far is folks booing Elizabeth Warren specifically. But otherwise, folks are just waiting for the Moreno race to come in. I spoke with the campaign manager for Bernie Moreno earlier this evening, and he tells me they feel very confident about this. We knew this was going to be a razor-thin margin on this, so they're feeling pretty good. You know, obviously, if it's going to be close, they're going to root for their candidate and say that they're going to win. But they say the early signs when we spoke to them about an hour ago were looking good. As far as how things are going, now we are still keeping an eye out for other folks in the area. Lieutenant Governor is here campaigning for Bernie Moreno as well. That would be John Husted. Again, hopes are very high right now for the folks who are rooting for Bernie Moreno here. We're still waiting for him to show up, however. We really think that's probably going to be later on in the evening, likely after 9 at this point. We know that he is going to be here after sitting with his family and getting that under control. As soon as he's here, you'll know about it on fox19.com. And as soon as we know the results, we'll let you know. But for now, live in Westlake, Ohio, with photojournalist Tom DeWeese, Brady Williams, Fox 19 Now.
All right, Brady, thank you. I think that we got Ken Brown in as well. Right now we're having some technical difficulties. Ken, can you hear me this time?
Yeah, and the last time you guys came out to us, you were actually hearing Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, who was up speaking, and she was the first speaker of the night here at Sherrod Brown's camp. We have not seen Sherrod Brown yet at this point, but we are keeping a close eye on those numbers, as everyone in the building here is. And the last time that I looked down, it was a 30,000 vote margin. It has since increased with Sherrod Brown taking the lead in this race with, I think, 38% of precincts reporting right now. We're going to continue to keep an eye on things, but for now, reporting in Columbus, Ken Brown, Fox 19 Now.
Ken, thank you. We'll be with you all evening long anytime. You can scan the QR code, get the very latest national and local results right there at the touch of your fingertips. We'll see you in the next hour.
Fox 19 Now stays with this breaking story.
Hear me here. There we go. Looks like you should be able to hear me. Rob will be back with us in just a minute. We're kind of trying to take breaks here because we are live streaming for quite a while, so trying to alternate. It does look like we are in a different position right now than we were when we took a break. So if you want to take a look at Ohio here, it is now considered a toss-up, despite the fact that it does look like the state is predominantly red. With 40% of the votes in, we know that Ohio has gone red in the past. In 2020, it did go Republican as well, but based on the data that our Gray Television Decision Desk has, they are still calling it a toss-up at this point. We've got a couple of other toss-ups right now as well. Here's Virginia with 37.9, so close to 40% of the vote in, went Democratic in 2020, but right now is considered a toss-up. And let's take you here. North Carolina, so 2020 went Republican, right now considered a toss-up. I mean, if you take a look here, we're seeing quite a mix of red and blue. So quite a bit of counties going for Trump, quite a bit of counties going for Harris. So that is an interesting tidbit as well. Otherwise, not a lot of huge developments here. This looks to be new, so we are seeing North Dakota, but it's a very, very small amount. Looks like just 2 counties in, just 0.6% of the vote. So still waiting on a lot of information here. Let's take a look at the local races right now and see what we got going on. So U.S. Senate 1, this has really not changed. We've seen this 40% for quite a minute. Okay, we are seeing now 42.6% of the vote in for this District 1 race. We've got Landsman here, 57%. So this is a flip. The last time that Rob and I took a look at this, Sansa was leading. So we have now seen this switch with Greg Landsman now in the lead at 57%. Let's take a look at prosecuting attorney. Again, we have some questions about this because it's still saying 0 out of 562. At this point, though, just based on these numbers, we do still see Connie Pillich in the lead, but again, these are pretty low based on the amount of people we believe did vote. And then here's a look at the sheriff's race as well, which this has been consistent with what we've seen so far with Charmaine McGuffey in the lead. And here's Ohio, which issue 1, which again we've been talking about. This is that redistricting, gerrymandering. This is really, really close. This has shifted a little bit. It's now 50% no and 49% yes. So I want to take you now to another story put together by our Washington, D.C. Bureau on the presidential race, because we know all eyes are on that race right now, and we've been watching it closely as well. We've talked to you about economy, we've talked to you about border security, but what about women's rights? That's been something a lot of people have been passionate about. We have seen this covered quite a bit. So this is a story that was put together by reporter Ashanti Ford. Again, she works at our Washington, D.C. Bureau with our parent company, Gray Television. And this is a story she put together on the 2 presidential candidates, again, being Trump and Harris, and their take on women's rights.
Gender inequality has disproportionately impacted women for centuries, according to Harvard's Business Review and a long line of testimonies, from the ongoing fight to receive fair wages to the latest efforts to protect women's reproductive health care options. Both presidential candidates now weighing in on what they plan to do to protect women if elected to be the 47th president of the United States.
You will no longer be thinking about abortion. So all they talk about abortion because we've done something that nobody else could have done. It is now where it always had to be, with the states and a vote of the people.
Abortion and the legislation that surrounds a woman's right to choose is front and center for both former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris.
But we got to remind our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, the stakes are so high. Because if he is elected again, I am certain he will sign a national abortion ban, which would outlaw abortion in every single state.
And while Trump has denied that he would sign an abortion ban, he's changed his position on abortion several times, according to timelines laid out by CNN and The Washington Post. Access to reproductive health options is also in question. In February of 2024, Alabama Supreme Court ruled that frozen embryos created during the IVF process are children under state law. Now, that could limit IVF access and care in the state and require doctors to pay more for malpractice insurance. This could in turn make the IVF process even more expensive for families.
I have always defended and supported IVF fertility, and so has the Republican Party, and we gave you and give you total support.
Trump has vowed to protect IVF treatments, posting to Truth Social that his administration would champion women's rights. Senate Democrats introduced a bill to provide nationwide access to IVF. It was panned by Republicans as a political stunt, and it lacked the votes needed to become law. Women's rights play a major role in this year's election process, and nonprofit organizations like the ACLU and several advocacy groups across the nation are encouraging women to use their power at the ballot box in November. Reporting from the nation's capital, I'm Ashanti Ford.
Okay, so that was, again, Ashanti Ford with our Washington, D.C. Gray Bureau reporting there on the presidential candidates and their take on women's rights. We're keeping a close eye right now on some of these local races. So here's the latest on the Hamilton County prosecutor's race. It's really hard to gauge exactly what we can expect here just because it still says reporting 0, 562. But we do know our Chancellor Wynne has been really closely following this case. He is live out tonight. Chancellor, can you tell us where exactly are you? I know that you're obviously covering the prosecutor's race. Where are you? Set the scene for us. Tell us what's going on and what have you learned as you have been researching and studying these candidates?
Yeah, so we are currently at the OTR Stillhouse. This is where the Hamilton County Democratic Watch Party is happening. You can probably hear a bit of the music because there are some very good vibes here. I mean, take a look behind me. I know it doesn't look too much like a party so much, but there's a DJ on the stage, there's drinks, food, music, and quite a few people here, of course, representing and supporting the Democrats here in Hamilton County. Now, focusing on the prosecutor's race, we know who's a part of this. Connie Pillett, she's the Democratic nominee, versus Melissa Powers, she's the Republican nominee. Now, to give you a little overview about both of these candidates, I know the voting is done, but just to give you a little overview about them, I mean, I can tell you, Connie Pillett, both of these people went to the University of Cincinnati Law School, but she's got a different background than Melissa Powers. Now, Connie, she actually served in the military, and she did that before going to law school. In fact, once she was honorably discharged, that's when she went back to law school, and she did that at the University of Cincinnati. Now, she has also been here in Cincinnati for a bit. She's a mother. She has served as the vice chair of the House Committee on Criminal Justice, but she's also served as a House of Representatives, a state representative. That's what she was elected to in 2008, and she served there for 6 years. Now, on to the other candidate here. That's going to be Melissa Powers. Now, Melissa Powers, she is a little bit more familiar with some of the people who follow these prosecutors' races because she is currently the prosecutor here in Hamilton County. Now, she assumed that role back in January of 2023, so about a year and a half ago, and that happened after Joe Dieters, the former prosecutor, was named a Supreme Court justice. So she took over his role and filled out the rest of his term, which leads us now here to November. Now, Melissa Powers, she also went to school at the University of Cincinnati, that College of Law there, but she also worked as a assistant prosecutor in the juvenile court. She was a judge. She became a judge again in 2016 or 18, and that's when she became a juvenile court system judge. So she might be a little bit more familiar to some of the voters, but when you look at the early voting, so these early voting numbers, that's all we really have right now, but I can tell you that Connie Pillett in those early votes, she's sitting at right over 58%, while Melissa Powers is a little bit lower at 41.8, so right under 42%. So 58% to 42%, that's where we were sitting at right now with Connie Pillett leading the way, but we are still waiting for many of these results to start to come in here. And of course, once we see these numbers start to pour in, I think we'll see a little bit of an uptick of the energy and the excitement here at the Hamilton County Democratic Watch Party. But again, we're at the OTR Stillhouse, which is in a little bit between two different neighborhoods, kind of in the West End, kind of in OTR, obviously with the name OTR Stillhouse. But we'll be out here all night long, monitoring how people are reacting, seeing the excitement, and of course, like most people, waiting for some of these election results to start to be tallied and start to come in, because right now we are still reporting at 0%, so none of these day-to-day, these actual voters who showed up today to cast their ballots, those have not been reported yet. I can tell you, I did see a little bit earlier some numbers about just the voter turnout here. I'm gonna look at my phone real quick and just tell you, we had, so about 67% turnout with 604,000 eligible voters here in Hamilton County. 405,000 of them actually showed up casting those ballots. So a very nice turnout here. We're just waiting for those results to start to come in here. But for now, reporting live at the OTR Stillhouse with photojournalist Christopher Waldman, I'm Chancellor Wynne, FOX19 Now.
All right, Chancellor, thank you so much. Appreciate that update. I'm sure we'll check back in with you later. We want to come back in here to the streaming center. So these are those numbers he was just talking about that robbed the prosecutor's race. Let's go back to this map because I'm curious to see if we've had any updates.
Okay,
Looks
so
like,
Ohio's leaning red.
Interesting.
Illinois has been called
For Harris.
for Harris. Let's take a closer look.
This is a shift as well. It was a toss-up last time I looked.
So 42% of the votes are in. Let's check Hamilton County only because we have two races we're following, Hamilton County Prosecutor and the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. And right now, in terms of the votes in, it still sits at 36.8.
Yeah.
So
there's still quite a bit to come in. There's
correct.
Still quite a bit to come in. Okay.
So, and we are going to go to Mike Schell because he's going to be live at Sheriff McGuffey's campaign headquarters as the votes come in.
I think some of these too, Rob, have slowly been shifting because this, I just checked, this was a toss-up as well. The two of these were toss-ups and they're now leaning toward Trump. And this one remains a toss-up there. Pennsylvania, oops, excuse me,
Be
still
careful.
leaning toward Harris. And then we still see
North Carolina
that
is
call is new.
leaning red. Yes, this call is new. And let's see if there's been any change in Michigan. More counties are coming in. What is this Wayne County? No, it's not. Wayne
There you
County's
go.
not in yet. So we'll continue to follow what's happening in Michigan as well. Now we're starting to get some of the votes from the Upper Peninsula.
Right.
Because it's becoming a little bit later, even though they're on Central Time.
Yeah, this
So we'll
is
continue to follow this for
slowly
you.
changing over time. Let me go back here for a second here because we mentioned earlier Mike Schell was with former Sheriff Jim Neal, who is battling it out against current Sheriff Charmaine McGuffey. The numbers as they sit are 63% McGuffey, 37% Neal. But we know, Rob, these are really early numbers. It looks like our Mike Schell is ready for us. We want to go to him now to get an update from that other side. You were just with Neal, Mike. Now you're with McGuffey. What's the status where you are there now?
Yeah, Jessica, lucky for us, McGuffey's watch party is at the OTR Stillhouse. Jim Neal is one door down at the Cincinnati Police FOP, so it didn't take us long to get over here. Sheriff McGuffey is not here yet, though we are told that she is making some different stops along the way from her campaign manager, but she is expected here by 9 o'clock. Now, the latest results that we have is that Sheriff McGuffey is leading Jim Neal by about 25 points. I talked to him just a little while ago, and he said to me, I still got a shot, I still got a shot. And you remember, it was Jim Neal who held the office back from 2013 to 2021. Sheriff McGuffey ran against him as a Democrat. He was primaried, and she beat Jim Neal. Well, Jim Neal now has turned to be a Republican, so now he is taking her on head-to-head. So two different scenarios there. They know each other well, more than 30 years experience with the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department. They work together in the jail, and so they have very familiar ties to one another, but totally different philosophies on each side. So we are waiting for Sheriff McGuffey to show up here at the OTR Stillhouse, and when she does, we will get back with you. We are live. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Mike. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
So earlier tonight, he was with the former Sheriff Jim Neal.
Right.
And now he's with Charmaine McGuffey's camp.
I want to jump in and check this one again. Okay, so this is a slight shift. This has gone up a little bit, I think, and so
It's
now
gone
we're
up,
43%.
Yeah.
And this had jumped because when we first started seeing the votes come in, Sansa was leading about 60%. Now we're seeing Landsman leading with close to 60%. But again, it's not even about half of the votes in yet. And then I know this one was already called in District 8. About 60-40 when you look at this, with about 40% of the votes in, with the Republican incumbent Warren Davidson leading there. And these are all ones we've already checked on. We can check on issue 1 for you here and see if there's an update. So this is also still a pretty close race, Rob, 51% to 48%.
With 42% of the vote in. And then what about the Kentucky Amendment 2?
Wow.
It's called.
It's been called. And that's with 67% of the vote in. So this is that Kentucky Amendment 2 we've been talking about, related to funding for schools and vouchers, and it is not going to happen.
And as you can see, it's not even close.
No, it's really not. I mean, 67% in, the numbers could fluctuate, but our decision desk has called this Amendment 2 in Kentucky has not passed. That will not be happening in Kentucky. Let's go back to this map because, gosh, Rob, we know this has been changing by the second, continuously changing by the minute. Are there any updates here that we can look out for?
No.
Looks about the same.
Yeah, Virginia was leaning blue, but now it's a toss-up again. And North Carolina was leaning blue, now it's leaning red.
Okay.
So and Ohio also switched up. It was leaning blue, now it's leaning red. At one point, it was a toss-up. So.
Yeah. And we've covered a lot of those topics that we've been talking about, Rob, with the presidential race. We covered the economy, we covered women's rights and border security. I think it would be worth now sharing a story with you that also came from our Gray Television, Washington, D.C. Bureau on ballot security, right? Because that has been a hot topic of conversation. People want to make sure that their ballots are going to be counted, that their vote is going to be counted. This story comes from Ryan Henson, again, with our Gray Television, Washington, D.C. Bureau, and this is on ballot security, so we'll share that with you now.
Since the country was founded, voting has been a cornerstone right that people have fought and died for. In recent elections, the security of each ballot has been in question. About a quarter of Americans say they have concerns about the way votes are processed, according to a PBS-NPR Marist poll. The numbers also show widespread voter fraud is very seldom.
An American is more likely to be struck by lightning than to get impersonated as another voter at the polls.
In recent weeks, several states have tried to change their voting process on the home stretch of the election. In the battleground state of Georgia, politicians are squabbling over new voting rules that would allow counties to delay certification of votes, hand counting, and other changes as early voting gets underway.
It would have allowed tampering with election documents by providing greater access to election documents. It would have expanded the ways in which people might intimidate the people who work our elections.
Poll workers say there have been increased threats of election security in recent years, one of which threats of physical violence towards election officials who are 80% women.
Our elections are run by people who come from our communities. So they're our friends, they're our neighbors, probably most likely our grandmas.
In St. Louis County, Missouri, Democratic Board of Elections Director Eric Fay says he hasn't faced threats, but knows many colleagues who have. Fay says false information is a real threat to the election process.
Folks have questions. Talk to your local election officials. Don't just read a bunch of stuff on social media. Go to the election office.
Fay says on top of conversation, transparency combined with checks and balances keep your ballot safe after submission. He works hand in hand with his Republican counterpart every step of the way.
Yes, in elections, chain of custody is paramount. And that's just not for ballots, that's for the voting equipment itself and for a number of other things that we handle. Much of what election officials do is open to the public.
Both election experts say if you have real concerns and really want to improve the process, get involved. Reporting in Washington, I'm Ryan Henson.
8:50 now, and at 9 p.m. we'll start seeing results from Arizona, which is a swing state, Wisconsin, swing state, Michigan, we're already seeing results from there, also a swing state. It should get interesting. We're also going to get more information from Minnesota, which is reliably blue. However, that's one to watch because that is Tim Walz's home state.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like things have slowed a little bit, Rob. I mean, I haven't seen these numbers jump significantly, and that's probably because a lot of that one just went to lean toward Harris. So that's a new development there. Only 5.5% of the votes in, though, so obviously still pretty early on, but it's been pretty consistent, I would say, wouldn't you, over the past 20 minutes? We haven't seen any massive jumps in the presidential race.
No, nothing out of the ordinary. And Kansas, number of votes in, 28%, but is leaning blue.
Right.
But I don't know if I don't know if that's going to hold, because that's a reliably red state.
It may just be early on, and we may see that flip again. And I mean, and this has been sitting at a toss-up now for quite a while. I mean, it bounced between the two, and now it's just been sitting there as a toss-up, and we haven't gotten an update. So it appears, I mean, 43.5%. When you look at it, it's funny, right? Because it looks so red.
Yes.
But there's so much more that obviously goes into that when our decision desk makes that kind of a call.
The question is, where are the counties? So Fairfax is like suburban DC, right? Prince William, same thing. So all the areas around DC are all blue.
Right.
Let's look at some of the other population centers.
28.3% of votes in this county as well.
Yeah, so more
just
popping
all
up.
Popping up.
Yeah, so we're seeing more things, right?
42.2%. Yeah, and guys, we've said this, but bear with us because we are literally actively getting these results in the same way that you are. We're seeing things pop up as you're seeing them pop up. And so sometimes it takes us a minute. We're trying to process everything that we're seeing as well and bring you the latest data as it's coming in. But right now, this looks like it's still sitting the way it has been for some time.
Georgia, 63% of the votes are in.
Okay.
And
one toss-up county.
Right, and so super close, right?
Yeah.
Right now, with
It
more
is
than
tight.
half the votes in.
And sometimes, too, it helps me almost to not even look at the percentage,
Yeah.
just to look at the numbers, just to see how close those numbers are. So we could see things change with Georgia as well. I mean, it has not been called. It's just leaning toward Trump right now. So that's something that we're watching closely.
Correct.
I want to jump back for a second, just check on Sherrod Brown, Bernie Moreno, because this has been a huge race. We're now up to 44, so about 45% in. Look at this. I mean, Sherrod Brown, 49%, Bernie Moreno, 48%. I don't know that it could be any closer. I mean, mathematically.
And also, we should mention that the Senate seat in West Virginia went to a Republican, and Democrats are trying to hold on to their control of the Senate. That's why this race is so important.
Rob, doesn't that put it, as right now, that would be 50-50 split, so.
And so what happens in a 50-50 split Senate, the vice president casts the tie-breaking vote.
And another reason the presidential race is so important.
Correct.
And speaking of that, we actually have a story we can share with you as well for some background on that Senate balance of power. This is reporter Brendan Collerton, once again with our Gray Television Washington, D.C. Bureau. In case you couldn't tell, they have been great assets for us. They've been able to do a lot of those stories. They've got those resources for us. But this is a story just, again, highlighting the balance of power in the Senate and how critical some of these races are this year. This is Brendan Collerton.
The Cook Political Report says this is the most favorable election map Senate Republicans have seen in decades, and it would likely take Democrats pitching a perfect game to hold on to control of the chamber. With 23 members up for re-election compared to just 11 for Republicans, the Cook Political Report says Democrats face an uphill battle on maintaining an edge in the Senate.
Democrats have no room for error. Not only do they have to re-elect every single Democratic incumbent, but Kamala Harris also has to win the presidency so that Tim Walz would be the tie-breaking vote in a 50-50 Senate.
Making things more difficult for Democrats, most of the Republican seats up for election are in solid red areas, while Democrats must defend seats in toss-up states or even states that have become increasingly red.
These are senators that won in 2006 when Democrats flipped the Senate in a backlash to President George W. Bush. They were reelected in 2012 when President Obama cruised to re-election, and then they won in 2018 when Democrats had a successful midterm in a backlash to President Trump.
Forecasts show particularly difficult races for John Tester of Montana and Sherrod Brown of Ohio, two states that have become significantly more Republican since the early 2000s.
In a presidential year when we are far more polarized as a country, and these states are, than they were when they were elected, almost 20 years ago, that just is where I find it hard to find a path to survival.
Republicans underperformed during the last election cycle, which Minority Leader Mitch McConnell blamed on bad individual candidates. But the GOP is widely believed to have a better crop this time around.
Overall, they have done a better job, particularly in a place like Montana, in a place like Pennsylvania.
Despite the GOP advantages, Cook predicts a close contest, believing Republicans will likely hold 51 to 53 seats in the next session of Congress. In Washington, I'm Brendan Collerton.
That's why $500 million was invested into the Senate campaign of Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno.
Okay, so this to me, I'm going to check something, Rob, here on our website just for a second.
Well, okay, so and I'll tell people what we're seeing in terms of this race and also the prosecuting attorney race. It just seems to me that these numbers have not changed at all in the last 20 minutes, which is unusual.
It is.
So we're going to try to look it up and see if we have different numbers like online.
So I'm looking here, we're trying to check here. So this is accurate. The presidential numbers do seem to be matching. The Senate numbers are matching, and that's a close race between Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno. This looks about the same with Greg Landsman and Orlando Sonza. We're trying to find here the Hamilton County Sheriff's race to give that a check. So let's see. That may be here. Give us just a second, folks. We're just trying to double check some things here. So it might take us a minute to find this.
While you do that, I'll just tell people what has been decided if you're just joining us. This has been called by our decision desk. This is Kentucky Amendment 2, which would allow public funds to be used for private school education. They called it. Voters overwhelmingly voted no on that. And issue 1, redistricting, 45% of the votes have been counted. And as you can see, it's very close, but right now, the noes have the lead in this, so would not change redistricting in the state of Ohio.
Rob, I did find it. It took me a minute because we have a lot of races on our website that we're following, so apologies for that. But
what do you have?
It does look like it's matching. So
okay.
Hamilton County Sheriff here, it looks like Charmaine McGuffey, the Democrat incumbent, has 63%, with Jim Neal, the Republican, who was sheriff previously, with 37%.
Yeah,
so
that's what we have.
Those numbers are matching. I just think what we're not seeing right now necessarily is the precincts that are reporting. But it does appear that Sheriff McGuffey is leading in this race.
Let's check Hamilton County voters again to see if we have a better idea of how many votes have been counted in Hamilton County.
This has stayed steady, I think, for a minute now, that 36.8%.
When we talk with Brittany, who's at the Hamilton County Board of Elections, we'll ask her why this is happening, because this has been stuck at 36% now for more than 20 minutes.
Do you think that this perhaps was just those early votes, and now they're really slowly getting the results from the people who voted today trickling in? Because it's just been sitting at that number for quite a while. And I thought we might have seen it jump a little bit more. And I mean, again, that is matching what's on here. I do want to note a couple of races, Rob, that we don't have on here that are worth mentioning. So the Ohio Supreme Court, right? We have some races with that. So let's double check that. So we have here.
And if I'm not mistaken, weren't 3 seats up for grabs?
3 seats up for grabs, and one of the people I know on the ballot is Joe Dieters, and that name should sound familiar because he was the prosecutor here. And if you look, so right now Joe Dieters is winning in this Supreme Court race for the Ohio Supreme Court. Republican Joe Dieters, the former Hamilton County prosecutor. It just went away on me, so let me pull that back up. But it looks like he is winning 53% to Melody Stewart, the Democrat, 46.9%. The votes in right now around 45%.
Check Megan Shanahan.
Let's see here.
I don't know what district of the Supreme Court she's with, but.
Yeah, and it's jumping pretty quickly, so it's not seeming to come up here, so I don't know.
Okay.
We might have to do some digging on that one, but we'll work on that because we do want to share that with you, because obviously the Ohio Supreme Court makes a lot of decisions.
Correct.
That impact a lot of people, and it is a really important race. So it looks like that's something we'll have to look at as well. But
right now it's a 4-3 Republican majority.
And so 3 seats up.
Correct. So this could really change what the Supreme Court looks like in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, it absolutely could. And I know another one we've been watching closely that's been kind of sitting right at that same price is the Greg Landsman, Orlando Sonza race.
Yeah.
That is still also pretty close. It's about 56% or so. We've had a couple of races called, but still a lot up in the air right now, Rob.
I do want to just note that since it's after 9 o'clock, we're getting some other states in.
Yes.
Nebraska, which splits its votes. It's not winner take all in Nebraska. South Dakota and North Dakota, these are all predominantly red states.
And they've already been called.
Wyoming, Liz Cheney's old seat, and New Mexico. Not many votes have been counted here.
And this is interesting, Rob. Can you talk a little bit about this? Because we're seeing some are blue and some are red.
So these 2 states, Maine and Nebraska, split their votes.
Right.
They go by popular votes, and they also go by district. So do you see these blue areas right here? Like Kamala Harris could get 1 vote here, while Donald Trump walks away with 2.
Important to know.
Yeah, those are the only 2 states
That states
does
can
it. Yeah.
split, and we do have 2 that we're watching, and so yeah, we're seeing that they're leaning for Harris, even though the state overall, those 2 have been called for Trump.
The other state that we're going to watch closely, that's part of the blue wall, is Wisconsin. But like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin does not start opening and processing ballots until today, even though they've had ballots now in their hand for weeks.
So that could take some time to come in. Let's hop back over here. I want to keep checking in on some of these races, because if one of these does get called, we are probably going to want to go out to the reporters in the field here. Wow. This is the closest it's been since we've been covering this today. It
48 and 48.
And he technically right now, Bernie Moreno has that edge by a very small amount of votes.
Fewer than 10,000.
Wow.
So the question is, and it's worth looking at a little bit later on, but since this race is so close, with about 50% of the votes counted, what would have happened if this person did not run?
Right, and where would those votes have gone? And would it or could it make the difference in this hotly contested race? That's a very valid point.
It just changed again.
Wow.
And now Bernie Moreno has about, what, a 30,000 vote lead?
But that percentage is still neck and neck. And I bet it will continue to be for
And we have about half of the votes outstanding. So, we're going to get to Brittany because...
Yeah, because we have questions about a couple of these, and we're hoping she might be able to help us out here, because we're still not clear, Rob, on exactly how many votes have been tabulated in Hamilton County and how many still need to be tabulated.
It seems, Brittany, to us, the votes are coming in slower in Hamilton County than anywhere else.
Yeah, so right now, according to the website, it's 67.19. So whenever you break that down, the number of voters on Election Day, 237,191 here in Hamilton County, 168,769 absentee. So we did just get a little bit of an update from Board of Elections officials just about the process and kind of where they're at with all of that right now. So I actually step out of the way so you can kind of see they are working behind me here a little bit right now. So basically what's happening is there are people that are out. I'm told that there are 25 trucks that are kind of scattered throughout the county right now that are essentially getting what they need to get from the polling locations that will then be brought here, so the poll workers will begin the tabulation process essentially. So that's not expected to happen until we were told about 9-10 o'clock hours. So hopefully soon we'll really start to see an influx of that coming in. I'm told as far as some of the results that's probably not going to happen until 11 o'clock, maybe even closer to midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. But we are talking about 262 polling locations, 562 precincts in Hamilton County altogether. So that's kind of where we are at right now. Board of Elections officials say that they have been busy, they've been steady, and at this point just waiting for more of those from the polling locations to come in.
My question for you is, if I do the math, when you said 237,000 and change, 168,000 and change, when I add them together, that's about 400,000 votes cast in Hamilton County over the course of the election, correct?
Right.
Makes sense, because when you pull up Hamilton County, because we tried to do the math earlier, we were like going, oh, now if we take these numbers and try to figure it out, it turns out to be 400,000 votes that were cast in Hamilton County in this election.
Yeah, so that math makes sense, and that's really helpful, Brittany.
Thank you.
Sure.
But here's my question. Let's look at similar counties. Let's look at Cuyahoga County. So, in here it's 42%, right, of votes counted. What about Cuyahoga County? 33%. So I guess we're on board. And what about 42%?
All around that same range.
Yeah. So all the metro areas in Ohio have the same number of outstanding votes. That's statewide.
Right, 50%.
Correct. So we're on the backside of this now.
Let's check in and see. I think a couple more states have been called here, Rob. It looks like some of these have been called for Trump, and we've got a couple now leaning for Harris. So slowly seeing some developments here. This is new, right? I don't recall this being called, or was this one called?
This one was called.
Okay.
They kind of did.
So some of these are slowly turning colors here, because we've been watching these closely, and then you've got several here. I mean, Colorado, but it's only 5.2%, so you got to keep that in mind.
And Colorado has been turning more blue over the years because so many people are moving to Denver and Boulder. So Colorado is more reliably blue today than it was 10 years ago.
Let's jump back for a second.
Okay.
If there's nothing new here.
This is new.
Okay.
Louisiana is new. It's being called for President Trump.
With only 2% in.
Correct.
So that's another early call. But again, we've emphasized this several times, but whether it's the Associated Press, whether it's the Gray Decision Desk, they make these calls based on a lot of information. And so even though sometimes it may seem like there's not a lot of votes in, they have data and analysis and voting trends that they are looking at when they're making these calls. Something just changed. But it happened quickly. Was it Ohio? No.
No, it is Ohio.
I was just going to say, something just went.
Ohio
So
is
Ohio has been called
for
Trump.
Donald Trump.
Okay.
With 50% of the vote in.
Yeah, here it is right here. So you can see it, 53% for Trump, 45% for Harris. That's based on 50% of the votes coming in right now. It has been called, Ohio has been called for Trump.
We should mention that this is the third time Donald Trump has won the state of Ohio in a presidential election.
And this now means that Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno race is even more critical for Democrats at this point in time.
Yes, because they're trying to, not only are trying to gain control of the House, but they're also trying to.
Slight shift again.
Yeah. His number has gone down by 1%. His has stayed the same at 49. It was 49 and 49, then it was 49 and 48, then it's 49 and 47.
And there's just another jump again. So now, and we've seen this candidate here, Don Kissick, also get some more votes. Last time he was about 77,000.
Okay, so this is a close race, right?
It is an extremely close race, and we've had crews out there, so it's going to take me just a second here, Rob, to get them set up. So we've got Brady Williams, who's been at the Bernie Moreno campaign out in Cleveland. So we'll see if he's available. And then we've also had Ken Brown, who has been at the Sherrod Brown campaign in Columbus. But Rob, I think first we should go to Brady, because right now, where things stand, Bernie Moreno is leading this race. Brady, it looks like there's even more people behind you now than the last time we checked in with you. What is the latest there?
People are fired up. Yeah, they're seeing those early results come in and seeing that Bernie Moreno is on top every single time. Big cheers for that, of course. Again, that's only 50% of the vote coming in at that point when they're cheering for these things. So still a very, very close race, like you guys have been covering all night long. So they're obviously keeping the faith here, cheering for Bernie Moreno as everything comes in, and so far with good results for them so far. So we're keeping an eye on things here. We have seen several different politicians come through now. We saw the Lieutenant Governor. Most recently, we saw the Attorney General David Yost here showing some support. So more people coming in, like you said there, Jessica. Plenty of folks here. It is standing room only at this point now. Lots and lots of people here. Lots of people getting prepared for Bernie Moreno to actually come out here. We're still waiting for him to come here. He has not arrived as far as we know. We'll let you know as soon as we know anything about this race here.
Yeah, I mean, just with 50% of the votes counted, they have to be feeling pretty good where you are, but it's still too close to call.
Yeah, it's very, very close to call. Brady, we'll check back in with you soon, especially if we get another development, Rob, on this race, because the numbers, I mean, look, we're at 50% right now. Still quite a bit of votes to come in, so this could shift again. We've seen it jumping back and forth. The numbers have been rapidly going. So we just got with Brady there. We do want to go now to our Ken Brown for the other side of things. Ken Brown has been in the Columbus area for the Sherrod Brown campaign. You know, Ken, we're seeing those numbers shift a little bit. There was a moment in time where Brown was in the lead. Now we're seeing Bernie Moreno in the lead in this case. Has that changed the atmosphere where you are?
You know, the atmosphere here is kind of been interesting. Aside from the music blaring, it's been fairly calm and muted here. Now, there have been a few races nationwide that have been called on the big screen that have drawn some applause and things like that. But overall, fairly quiet here. Like we said, you mentioned 50% reporting now, and obviously Sherrod Brown behind in this race. Another thing you guys brought up earlier that I think is worth noting is the Libertarian candidate in this, Don Kissick, who at last check I believe had more than 70,000 votes in this election here for this U.S. Senate seat here in Ohio. And at no point today, as these districts have been reporting, has the margin between both Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno been that large. I mean, this has been razor thin the whole way, and like I said, especially now with Bernie Moreno in the lead with 50% reporting, things remain fairly calm here aside from the music that's going on behind me. It'll be worth keeping an eye on some of these districts where things still may be on the border. You see a couple districts up near the Toledo area, a couple counties up there where maybe you don't have your full numbers in. It'll be interesting to see what some of those outlying counties away from those major metropolitan areas will do, and where these numbers shift is the remaining 50% report. But for now, reporting live from Columbus, Ken Brown, Fox 19 Now.
All right, Ken, thank you very much. So as we take a look at the numbers, we keep going back and forth.
Right.
51% is in now, and
Not
Bernie
a huge
Moreno.
shift with the percentage, but the numbers.
49, 47%.
Yeah, and we were just checking this one as well. This is still, it's still a close race, and it's still, I don't know, at 50% in, but 53-46. Tough to say, Rob. I mean, it's not been called yet.
Yeah, and from talking with Brittany, we know about 200,000 votes are still yet to be counted.
So this could shift again. It's really difficult to say. And then just bringing you these Hamilton County races again, these have sat in this position for a while. I haven't seen a huge shift in either one of these. I mean, this has sat the same. So let's go back to the presidential race, though, and make sure nothing new has happened here. Just glancing at the map, nothing is jumping out at me, Rob, as something new.
This.
Okay.
New Mexico was not leaning red.
Okay. Interesting is it's only 1.6% of the votes in so far, so that's early, and we've seen some of those shift again. Still have some of those battleground states like Georgia leaning red and Pennsylvania leaning blue, two really critical states for both sides in this.
Let's take a look at Pennsylvania right quick. In terms of votes
20%.
in, 20%.
Okay. And this is exactly what you said we would start to see. The blue and the red, and then some of a mix around some of these other areas.
Correct. So we'll have to see what happens. I think this is the area around Philadelphia and all of its suburbs.
And we got a couple toss-ups, and I think, Rob, we just saw this switch back to a toss-up again.
Okay, it's up in the air.
That has flipped from lean red to lean blue to toss-up to lean again, and now it's back to a toss-up yet again.
And remember, the number to get to is 270.
And
right
we're
now,
not there.
We're not there.
We have a long way to go, and we told you this from the beginning. We may not know this tonight.
No,
and
I know,
there's a good chance we won't. So let's see if we've got any other updates here. Trying to stay on top of this because I fear that with this one especially, I mean, this is another slight shift.
Yes, but now we're getting, no.
Looks like this candidate, Kissick, here is jumping up a little bit strictly when it comes to vote numbers. From 77 to 80-something and now into the 90,000 range.
And just so you know, we know how important this race is, and we're going to continue to watch it. And we'll probably continue to stay here until this race is called. Just switched again.
Yeah.
50 to 47. So he went up a point, he stayed at 47.
And that's the thing is, should we find out the outcome of these races, we will take you live to hear from the candidates when they speak. But at this point, some of these races are quite frankly too close to call, and we just are not able to do that. Some of the races that have been called that we've already kind of told you about was Kentucky Amendment 2. We know Indiana governor's race was called as well. Something that I do want to mention here, Rob, is we talked about the Senate balance of power, but it's not just the Senate, right? It's the House as well that could be impacted quite a bit. And we have another story that we can share with you here from, once again, reporter Brendan Collerton. This is a package he put together, a story he put together on the House majority and how it's at risk today. And many political forecasters have said it really could be a true toss-up. So this is Brendan Collerton with our Washington, D.C. bureau, specifically talking about the House balance of power.
Election forecasters say the race is too close to say one party has a significant advantage for controlling the House of Representatives. Swing districts on each coast could be the key. The nonpartisan Cook Political Report says the current situation in the House of Representatives gives Democrats an opening.
Republicans have an incredibly narrow control of the House right now. They only hold 4 seats. So Democrats would only need to net 4 seats to win control of the House in 2025.
But can they do it? A party needs to control 218 of the 435 seats in the House to control the chamber. Cook's model says the 26 races they deem as true toss-ups will be the key.
The bulk of it is made up of Republicans who are defending seats that Biden won in 2020. A lot of those seats are in New York, in California, and then we have Democrats who are also defending seats that Trump won or Biden narrowly won that are also quite vulnerable.
Cook Political House editor Aaron Covey says it will likely come down to Republicans' ability to hold on to areas in California and New York where they overperformed their historical outcomes in 2022.
So there's seats on Long Island that Biden won by double digits, for example, that Republicans were able to flip in 2022, and now Democrats are hoping to flip them back.
The party that wins the White House will have an advantage in the House of Representatives. In 2020, voters in only 16 districts selected a different party's congressional candidate than presidential candidate.
Most folks don't know who represents them in Congress, and so they're just voting down the party line. So it's really difficult for a member of the House to differentiate themselves from the national party.
The winning party's majority in Congress has shrunk every year since 2015. In Washington, I'm Brendan Collerton.
Okay, a couple of updates, Rob, when it comes to the presidential race here.
Yeah, first of all, no surprise. Texas going red.
Right.
We need to figure out if Ted Cruz is able to hold on to a seat after Colin Allred kind of mounted and kind of threatened his Senate seat. So we'll take a look at that. The other thing that just popped up is it's early, but Iowa is leaning blue. But as you can see, not even 10% of the votes have been counted.
Still
but
early.
the reason why people find this interesting is because a poll was released over the weekend that gave Kamala Harris a 4-point advantage over Donald Trump. We're getting word from Wisconsin, but only 3% of the vote has been.
Right, still early.
But, and this is the reason why people are watching, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, that's your blue wall. Trump won all 3 in 2016, and then Biden was able to come back and win it in 2020.
Right.
That's why people are going to be watching this very closely. But for both candidates, and I think especially for Kamala Harris, the way this board sits right now, Pennsylvania is a must-win for her.
Yeah.
For where it sits right now.
It looks that way right now. I mean, and it's still early. We still have to get to that 270 mark.
Yeah.
We have not hit 200 for either of the candidates. So there's still a lot. And I mean, we know California is going to add 54, and there's a lot still to come here.
Yeah. So, of course, Kamala Harris was the Attorney General for the state of California.
Right.
And she's from California. And so she should be able to easily get Washington, Oregon, and California. So she should have this whole West Coast in terms of being in her favor.
What it feels like you're telling me, Rob, right now is what we all thought is this whole race feels like a toss-up right now in this moment.
Yeah.
We have no way of knowing how this is going to end up based on what we're seeing right now.
Because that hasn't been decided. Pennsylvania hasn't been decided. Michigan, Wisconsin.
Georgia's leaning, but it's not been decided either.
Georgia's leaning, but it hasn't been decided. Let's take a look at Georgia once again.
Okay, so 70%. It's interesting to me that this has not been called. With 70%,
Me too.
It makes me think there's other things they're looking at here.
The question is, what are the counties that are still out? Because the one thing that, because they thought maybe this county, Fayette, they thought Fayette could go blue, but it's leaning red. Because that is Fulton County, Atlanta, blue.
Called for blue.
I was wondering if there were like any big
What's this toss-up county? Are you familiar with Terrell?
No.
Interesting. Okay. I was curious there because it seems to be sitting between red and blue in that area.
So yeah, and the same thing with North Carolina. 50% in, and it's 50.6, 48.3.
Close races. Close races. And that's, I feel like we've been saying that a lot, but we're seeing close races, not just what the presidential race, but some of our local and state races as well. I mean, it's just, I don't know that we're going to find out these results for sure tonight.
Let's check Bernie Moreno and Sherrod Brown.
There could be another jump again.
He went down by a point.
Close.
He went down by a point.
And we've got a little bit more in now, so now we're close to 57% in when it comes to this race. But I mean, still close in those numbers.
Yeah, he's ahead by like 93,000 and change.
And Kissick is now up to 100,000, which is significant because he was at 77 and then did a jump, and now he's jumped again.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see who he stole votes from.
Exactly.
Right, so we're going to continue to watch this one as well.
I want to see if I know there was a couple of other races that we were looking at here, Rob. I'm seeing some of the House decisions on here as well. We're looking at some of these battleground areas. Let's see what we've got going on here. So that is a breakdown of the presidential. It does look like none of these look like huge battleground developments. I was just looking at some of the other Senate and House races across the country because I know we've all been watching those. Wasn't it Texas? Was it Cruz you were mentioning before, Rob? And
Cruz and Colin Allred.
Okay, so right now it has Cruz leading at this point with 59% of the votes counted in Texas. Looks like he just went up about 6% in Texas. So that's according to the Associated Press, I should say.
The question is, what is outstanding in Texas? Right? I mean, you would have to look at the Democratic strongholds of Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio.
Yeah.
And there's some blue here. There's a lot still out, so
yeah,
we'll have to wait. It's El Paso, 62% of the votes in. Okay.
And that's been called for Harris.
So yeah.
So that's another thing that we've been watching because on top of what we're doing here, we're trying to keep an eye on some of these other battleground states and some of the significant races there, just to keep an eye on that. Yeah, Moreno's still leading in Ohio, and it looks like in Michigan, it does look like, Rob, the Senate race, a Democrat is leading there, as well as in Pennsylvania. Republican won the Senate in Florida, is leading in Texas and Wisconsin. Nebraska, looks like it might be a different party there. It's tough to see. But yeah, it looks like a lot of these are still going to come down to the wire. By the way, I do want to mention to you all that we are about to go back to the studio once again for another cut in here. So stand by for that. We are going to send it over here to Tricia Mackey because she's going to be taking it out live to reporters once again who have been out in the field continuing to cover some of these key races. And a lot of these cases, they haven't gotten any updates in a while either. So stand by. We're about to send things in to the studio.
FOX19 Now. This is Election 2024.
Right now at this hour, AP News has called Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana all for Donald Trump. Ohio just joined that list moments ago. We're also following some very close races locally, including Ohio's U.S. Senate race. We have seen that lead switch back and forth between Democratic incumbent Sherrod Brown and Republican challenger Bernie Moreno tonight. So it is definitely too early to call, but we have a little bit over 57% of the vote in right now. We have team coverage of this race covered. Ken Brown is in Columbus with the Brown campaign. Brady Williams is in Cleveland with Moreno's campaign as well. Ken, we're going to kick it off with you.
Yeah, and Sherrod Brown's camp has been fairly quiet, and maybe for good reason at this point. They are behind with about 58% reporting at this point. We heard some cheers earlier as some early election results had started to come in, but it's been a fairly muted crowd since then. Really, the only thing blaring here is the music at this point. A lot of side conversations going on about what's happening, but there are still a lot of votes to be counted in this race. And if you're looking at the election map, Henry, Fulton, and I believe it's Crawford County still have reported no results. Not good news for Sherrod Brown's camp. While they have maybe not as many voters as metropolitan areas. Those are historically Republican areas, so you can pretty much chalk those up to the Bernie Moreno camp. But if you're looking at the metropolitan areas, that's where Sherrod Brown has been dominating the map here, and that's where he continues to hope to make up ground on Bernie Moreno. Also worth noting in this race, it's been razor thin the entire evening between these two candidates, and at no point has the margin between the two candidates been the same, or less than rather, the amount of votes that Libertarian candidate Don Kissick is getting. So that's another side story in all of this. We're going to continue to follow this, but for now, reporting live in Columbus, Ken Brown, Fox 19 Now.
All right, Ken, thank you. Let's go ahead and talk about Senator Brown's opponent, Bernie Moreno. Brady Williams is in Cleveland right now. Brady, what's going on there?
Yeah, so several times over the last few minutes, this room has erupted. First was when Ohio was called for Donald Trump. Next was when Ted Cruz was called for Texas. We're also seeing, once those results came in, that it is looking like things are in favor of Bernie Moreno right now. That was when there were more cheers happening here. So things are looking up for them at this time. But again, that was when there was 58% of the vote in. So there is still time for things to shift here. It is not at all set in stone. It is too early to call this. But folks here at the Bernie Moreno camp are feeling that things are looking to be in their favor for right now. We're going to keep an eye on things. We're still waiting to see if Bernie Moreno arrives here and what time exactly that will happen. We'll let you know as soon as we have more information here. We're going to have you covered all evening long right here on Fox 19 Now.
All right, it's definitely crowded there. Another race locally we are watching in Ohio is District 1 seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. Democratic incumbent Greg Landsman has pulled ahead over Republican Orlando Sanza. We are saying there's a little bit more than 50% of the votes counted right now, but again, that race has not been called. It is too early. To Kentucky, Amendment 2, that has been a really hot contested issue, also known as School Choice Amendment. It has failed. It would have allowed the General Assembly to create a policy to use state funding for non-public schools. You could choose if your child could go to private schools. Well, we got you covered all night long as we continue to watch those races that matter to you the most. You can scan the QR code anytime. It'll take you straight to our website where we have the very latest results. We're also going to have team coverage coming up at 10 o'clock. And in the meantime, we're going to continue to bring you updates right here.
Fox 19 Now stays with this breaking story on the Fox 19.
Okay, so just got back from that live cut-in on the air with Tricia Mackey here. We've been closely monitoring this map, Rob and I. No significant developments, right, Rob? I mean, we're not seeing massive amounts of change. They're not calling Georgia yet, though, even with almost 75% of the vote.
I don't know why that's the case, because right now it's 2,100,000 to 1,900,000 with only 25% of the vote out, but they haven't called it yet.
Right. It's interesting.
Let's check North Carolina. 52% of the votes in. It went Republican the last time. That's not being called yet either, but it has a ways to go.
Right.
When it comes to counting all the votes. But if Donald Trump wins Georgia and North Carolina, Vice President Kamala Harris is going to have to sweep Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Insiders say she can do it, but that's a hard thing to thread. Biden was able to do it in 2020, but Donald Trump was able to do it in 2016.
And I wonder, Rob, do you think we'll even know? I mean, again, this is only 10% right now that Wisconsin is leaning red. So it's still so early when it comes to the votes. I mean, and we've seen this before where it leans red or it leans blue with less than 10%.
Correct.
And then it jumps again and then it becomes a toss-up.
Correct. So I don't know. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, we've got a toss-up county right here that hasn't been called for either yet. We've got one called for Harris, several called for Trump, and that just flipped. That just was leaning blue and now just leaned red.
Let's see what's happening there.
Green.
Has
40%.
40% of the vote in.
Okay.
So we'll continue to watch those states. As the evening goes on, it looks like they're going to be even more important.
Yeah.
Let's check the Senate race again because that one is just updating.
Extremely close. Okay.
50 to 46. He's gone down 1. He's gone up 1.
And this is now where about 60% of the votes have been counted in this case. So a significant amount, but because of how close this race is, this is not a race that's going to be called right now because it's just far too close.
Pull up the states again because let's just check Ohio and see where the votes are more favorable to Sherrod Brown. So let's check Cuyahoga County.
35% are in that county.
So he'll overperform there, right? Lucas County.
40%.
That's home of Toledo. Now Franklin County, I think this is Franklin, yeah. 55% of the vote in. Hamilton County, 42% of the vote in.
Okay.
So,
and that's been slow and steady. Hamilton
correct.
County votes.
So if Sherrod Brown is going to make any kind of gains on the lead that Bernie Moreno has, he's going to make it up in those counties.
Right.
That aren't fully done yet. So let's just take a look at a random red county. Let's pull up Brown County. 43% of the vote is in.
Okay.
So a ways to go in the race for Senate in the state of Ohio.
Which we anticipated.
Yeah.
I mean, we did. We've been waiting, obviously, for more of these presidential results to come in. I know, Rob, that some of these states out here, Arizona in particular, the polls don't even close until 10 p.m. Eastern. Any of these other ones, are you aware, will they be closing soon or have they closed now that it is 9:30? Are we going to see some more votes trickling in?
Let's see.
Because I know, obviously, California and some of those places, no votes have been counted just quite yet.
Well, according to this, Arizona should have closed at 9 o'clock.
Okay, so in theory, we should start seeing some votes in some of these western states then.
We should, in theory.
Okay.
So, yeah.
This just flipped here too, Rob, to a toss-up.
So, let's see what's happening in this state. Votes, it went Republican. Less fewer than half the votes are in. But even though Kamala Harris is barely winning here, there's still so much votes out that they put it as a toss-up when before it was leaning blue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So there's still a lot of states here that are leaning blue.
That just switched again, didn't it?
Wisconsin just switched.
See? It is rapidly changing and evolving as we watch this map. That just happened as we were sitting here looking at it. So now we're seeing a shift a little bit again, where this is now leaning toward Harris, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which, Rob, are those three states you said. Okay. At this point, it looks like she may have to take if she were to win this race.
Correct, right? So let's check Milwaukee. So this one here is Dane County, which is the home to the University of Wisconsin.
Okay.
In Madison. And then this is Milwaukee, 25% of the vote. If Kamala Harris is going to make up any ground, it'll be in those two counties.
Right.
So we'll have to wait to see.
So less than 20% of the vote in, but that has flipped now. So that's one of those other states we've been seeing go back and forth and back and forth. And despite quite a few votes being in Georgia, still has not been called. And again, there's a reason for that, because the people who are calling these races obviously have reasons before they make that kind of decision. And there's a reason they're holding off.
Right, especially when more than 75% of the vote has been counted in the state. Let's see what's happening in North Carolina. 59% of the vote has been counted in North Carolina.
It looks close, though.
When
you pull up some of these states, it's close. We've got 51.1% to 47.8%. And again, that's probably why some of these states have not been called, because it is just far too close.
People were saying that they thought Kamala Harris had a chance here in North Carolina, even though the last person to win the state was Barack Obama. And I think that was on the first time he ran in 2008, not in 2012.
Okay, and we've seen Iowa, which we talked about. You talked about the reason why people are watching Iowa. Now, I know it's still early. We're talking about less than 12% here, but it is still leaning toward Harris as of this moment.
Correct.
Which is unusual.
It's unusual because this is a very red state, and people were like thinking, if this is the trend in Iowa, maybe that means good things for the blue wall, as the Democrats call it.
Yeah, it looks like at this point, the states that we expected to go certain ways have gone that way. The states that we knew would be battleground states and would be really close are the exact states that are too close to call at this point. I'm going to hop back over for a second, Rob, and just go through some of these other local and state races. I want to make sure we haven't missed anything. This is still close. We now have 61% of the votes in with Marino leading, but it is still a 50 to 46% race. So that's close as well. Let's check on Landsman. Also close.
So this has been interesting because he was leading Sonza, and then Landsman was leading, and now it looks like Sonza's closing the gap.
It's close.
With 57, 58% of the vote counted so far.
And experts that we had talked to, Rob, did not expect this.
No.
I mean, and that's not an opinion we're giving. That is what experts told us, is that they expected that Landsman would take this race. Some even thought in a landslide because of Hamilton County tending to go blue.
And the other thing, too, is Greg Landsman was able to beat Steve Shabbat, who's held onto the seat since 1995.
Right.
I think in 2008, he might have lost one race, but then got his seat back. And the only reason a lot of insiders think Landsman was able to defeat Steve Shabbat was because they did redraw the lines of Ohio District 1. And that might have given him the edge he needed to beat Steve Shabbat, who's been in that seat for so long.
Well, we'll see if anything changes with that. This is that race we talked about. This one, District 8, has still not been called either, but this looks like a significant now lead there, Rob. I mean, last time we checked, it was a little bit closer. It does look like Warren Davidson is kind of edging out Vanessa right now, but we'll keep watching it. The prosecutor race here in Hamilton County has stayed. These numbers, you guys, have not really moved.
At all.
We don't know where this race is going because we don't have enough numbers to tell you anything. And it's the same here with the sheriff's race. These have sat at 63. I mean, I don't think that number has changed. And then these other races we've already told you about, but just in case you're joining us now, Ohio Issue 1, this is what we're seeing here. 60%, 54% saying no, 45% saying yes. Once again, this is that issue related to redistricting and gerrymandering, specifically in Ohio. This race was called a while ago, Rob. Kentucky Amendment 2 related to school funding and vouchers. This was called. That is not happening. And then probably, I think, the first race that we saw called was the race for Indiana governor. Just checking back in now that we got a few more votes in. He has still taken over, or was already declared the winner with 54% of the vote here. And so while we're kind of letting this go, I don't see any other updates, Rob. I do want to talk a little bit about another one of the issues that has really impacted that presidential race, because we've talked about, the economy, we've talked about women's rights, ballot security, border security, also the Middle East. I mean, we see a lot of activity happening over there right now. What do the candidates think about it? So this is another story from a Washington, D.C. bureau here. This reporter in this case is Ryan Henson again, and this is the presidential candidate's take on what is going on in the Middle East.
Tension boiled over on October 7th, 2023. Hamas fighters massacred 1,200 people and took more than 250 hostages in Israel. This, a turning point in the history of the Middle East and for this year's election.
Many American Muslims, their top issue is Gaza and stopping what they view as a genocide in Gaza.
The Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, believes a ceasefire in Gaza will bring regional peace and give an estimated 2.5 million Muslim American voters peace of mind as they head to the polls.
I want to see the Middle East get back to peace and real peace.
End this war and bring the hostages home.
Leaders in the Muslim community say they want a comprehensive ceasefire that starts with the stopping of bombing in Gaza. It would also include the return of all prisoners from each side, Israeli troops going home, and the eventual establishment of the Palestinian state.
Vice President Harris has expressed strong support for the Israeli government, while also saying that she wants a ceasefire. She wants the war in Gaza to end. President Trump has said that the war will come to an end, but he hasn't said how he will do that. And he has expressed support for the Israeli government and its desire to finish the job in Gaza.
In the battleground state of Michigan, home of the largest Arab American population, sealing that deal could mean a victory for either candidate on Election Day. And recent polling shows that 2 in 5 Americans are concerned about the violence in the region spreading. One pro-Israel expert says that Donald Trump is the right person to stabilize the Middle East.
He would be stronger foreign policy as it relates to dealing with the enemies of the United States.
Israel supporters say the war has already spread to the U.S.
But what you're seeing today on American college campuses, which are social indicators of our values, being wrapped with flags of Hamas and Hezbollah. The war is already here.
Even as the ballots are rolling in, American diplomats are in the region continuing to push for a ceasefire. In Washington, I'm Ryan Henson.
Okay, so that was once again Ryan Henson, just another one of those presidential issues that a lot of people have been concerned about. We've seen another switch here just in the about 2 minutes that story aired.
Yeah, Missouri is now a toss-up state. But as you can see, only 22% of the vote has been counted so far.
Yeah.
And
this is close.
It's tight. 49.7, 49.2.
That's really tight. That's no joke.
Speaking of tight, let's go back to Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno.
Yeah, this has been a really close race.
Now, so this is probably the lowest number I've seen from Sherrod Brown.
Mm-hmm.
He's now down to 45%. He's over 50%. That's the first time we saw that. And usually he was at 49, 48, 47. Right. Now he's at 45.
And it's interesting because, you know, we have 62% in, close to 63%. That is a significant amount, right? That's more than half. But this race is just too close to call. And it feels like, Rob, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, this might be a race where they almost wait until close to 100%, because, depending on where this goes. But if it keeps staying this close,
yes,
you have to really wait it out to make sure to make that decision.
Correct. Because if we look at the state of Ohio, just overall, how many percent of the vote has been counted?
Switch again.
63%. So we're more than halfway there, right? Where'd you see that switched?
Right here.
So Wisconsin.
This has flipped. This is the third time.
Yes, it is now a toss-up.
And it's still early because it's not even, we're just now reaching about a quarter way there when it comes to the votes counted. But it was leaning red, it flipped to leaning blue. It's now back to a toss-up. Let me tell you what hasn't changed though. Pennsylvania leaning blue and Georgia leaning red. That's stayed consistent for, gosh, I want to say about an hour.
My question is, okay, so 58.
Mm-hmm.
This is usually solidly a Democratic state, but the governor is a Republican, so I don't know if that's affecting
it's tough
who
to
people
say.
are voting
and
for.
We've got a couple of toss-up counties in there still.
Yeah.
So we're seeing toss-ups. This, how many are in? 44% in Colorado. Okay. So that's more than before, I think. We've seen some more votes trickling in there. And they did go, like you said, Democratic back in 2020 as well. But gosh, this one is flipping quite a bit, and it's been doing it a lot.
So honestly, like out of all the battleground states, too close to call, 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 right? And then when you get out west, when we start getting the numbers out west, too close to call Nevada, too close to call Arizona.
Right, right.
So we got a long night.
We do. But we are here to tell you that we are about to wrap up our streaming coverage here because we do have to get ready for the 10 p.m. news. The streaming is not going to stop. We're going to send you over to Local News Live, which is a product put on by Gray Television. They'll still be covering the election, so you can continue to watch this live stream right up until the 10 o'clock news. That will start here on Fox 19. Rob will be back on the desk with Trisha. I will still be up here monitoring these results, and all of our reporters will be out live.
I just want to check it one more time
Yes,
before I leave this room.
absolutely, just to make sure.
It's changing so much.
Slight shift again. He dropped down from 51.
And he went up.
Yeah.
By 1 point.
It is just teeter-tottering all night long.
64% of the vote in.
Very close race. Presidential race is very close. If you have been watching with us tonight, whether you started with us at 7 or joined us 5 minutes ago, we really appreciate you watching and for bearing with us while we kind of jump around to a bunch of different things. But Rob Williams and I, again, we're going to go ahead and stop our streaming here, send you over to Local News Live. But please join us at 10. Rob will be out at the desk with Trisha. We'll have our reporters live everywhere. And those results, as they come in, we'll bring them to you live during the 10 p.m. newscast.
And as winners are decided, you're going to hear from them right here on Fox 19 Now.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we want to thank you so much for, again, just joining us today. We really do appreciate your time and hope you have a great rest of the night.
Yeah.